East Hampton Town Board, we are live.
Thank you, Jason. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the East Hampton Town Board work session of Tuesday, March 17th, 2026, otherwise known as St. Patrick's Day. Michael, if you could please read the roll call.
Councilmember Flight.
Present.
Deputy Supervisor Lease.
Present.
Councilmember Rogers.
Present.
Councilmember Ian Calder-Piedmont.
Present.
Supervisor Kathy Burke-Gonzalez.
Present. If we could all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So today we start the meeting with public portion, and we ask you please to kindly keep your comments to 3 minutes. And then we have 7 topics today. And we start with bids with Jeannie Carrozza. Then we're going to have a Route 114 affordable housing market study and update. That's followed by accessory staff housing discussion, followed by an ADU after hearing discussion. Then we will discuss ADU construction loan recommendation, real property tax exemption for ADUs, rent-restricted employer-sponsored housing, and a code amendment to Chapter 255-1-20. That'll be followed by liaison reports and resolutions. So first, we start with public comment. Is there anyone here? David, you're up. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, David Buda from the Springs. This morning, I'd like to address one of your topics that will be topic E, the proposed residential accessory dwelling unit construction assistance program, although my comments also do bear on some of the issues on another topic that we'll be discussing, the post-hearing discussion of the ADU code changes. First of all, this is a follow-up to an email I sent you to remind you that the Community Development Long Island program that you are already participating in, the ADU +1 program, which is a forgivable grant program for the construction of ADUs, requires that all assistance be given to full-time residents. The CDCL's +1 ADU program requires proof of residency to ensure that the grant assists permanent residents rather than speculators or second home owners. You are so focused on the benefits of adding additional ADUs that unfortunately I think you're forgetting about the detriments that you would be at the same time creating by allowing and enhancing the ability of non-full-time residents, investors who are only involved in income-producing properties. You would be encouraging their additional purchasing of homes in the community that would otherwise be used by full-time residents. We unfortunately are becoming more and more a resort seasonal community and losing essentially the spirit of community in our town. I was absolutely shocked as I watched the purchases, the recording of new deeds of residential properties in the town. I can report a very dangerous statistic. Of the last 10 houses that were sold in the Springs and had their deeds recorded, 7 out of 10 were purchased by limited liability companies. That's the same high percentage as in Amagansett. We are losing more and more of the full-time residents in this community, and that is a long-term detriment. So you should, I suggest, do nothing to encourage that trend. And by allowing non-full-time residents to participate either in these interest-free construction loans or in the ADU +1 grant program, or in any way allowing them to participate in both the rental registry program and the ADU construction program, you are actually creating a detriment to the community that may outweigh the benefits by adding additional ADUs. Think about that. Now, one more thing specifically with regard to the proposed construction loan assistance. That's $1 million that I suggest should rather go to the housing authority rather than to creating ADUs that might be built on properties owned by LLCs or income-producing corporations. But a couple of the aspects of the proposal that bother me most are the fact that the owners, whether they be a corporation or an LLC or an individual, only have to use that ADU in compliance with the town code for 10 years. That means that they're going to get the benefit of a $100,000 interest-free loan, require that the ADU be used in compliance with the town code for only 10 years, and then for the rest of the life of the ownership of that property, which could be infinite because corporations and LLCs can have an infinite lifespan. You can convey property owned by an LLC or a corporation by trading stock, selling stock, or by changing the members of the LLC. That could be an infinite period of time. So you might get the benefit of a 10-year compliance, and then the rest of the time, that loan does not have to be repaid to the town because there's no requirement. You're proposing only a 10-year requirement that the $100,000 interest-free loan be used to create that ADU and continue to have it maintained in the program. And I guess that's all the time I have, so thank you.
Thank you, David. Would anyone else like to address the board? Jason, is there anyone on the line?
Yes, we have one caller on the line. I'll unmute right now.
Great, thank you.
Hello, caller ending 8764. You're on the air.
Hello? Oh.
Hi, you're on the air. If you can mute the TV in the background, I'd much appreciate it.
Okay, yes. I didn't hear my number. It's Carol Buda, and hang on one second. I wanted to make a comment about the size of the ADUs. In the expanded legislation, you're allowing smaller lots, but you haven't changed the limitation on the size of a detached ADU, and it's a minimum of 600 square feet up to 900 square feet. And I can tell you have property that size, and in my neighborhood, there are homes on that size lot where the home is on one side of the lot and maybe only 900 or 1,000 square feet. They would be able to build basically another similar sized house on the same small lot. And I think that I hope you will give serious consideration to, with the expansion to include smaller lots, to limit the size of a detached ADU on that size. And I think it's a step backward. I want to bring your attention to, in 1976, when the town hired professional planners to address some of the issues created by too many houses on small lots. They passed the urban renewal map, and this is a brief excerpt from the introduction to it. It said the town board finds that the unregulated development of certain old file maps, poorly planned subdivision areas recorded with the county prior to the implementation of planning and zoning in East Hampton pose a severe threat to the environmental and economic well-being of the population of the community through potential large-scale overdevelopment, overclearing of land, overcrowding of population, depletion of resources, erosion of soil, pollution of lands and waters, disruption of the goals of the town's comprehensive plan and zoning code, and that such old file map areas constitute quote-unquote substandard or unsanitary areas, referring to, obviously, the septic. I think, I know everyone's intentions are good, but we already have a crisis of loss of habitat, and there are many properties where they will be able to build one of these structures within the setback restrictions on the property. I mean, you only have to look at the Amagansett lanes to see that, when people were taking these smaller homes and building to the limits of the zoning, and then everybody wasn't happy afterwards because of the huge size of these houses, and it was too late to do anything about it. So, in medicine, when they want to help people, the first adage is do no harm. And I think you have to look at this in the same way. You're really degrading the single-family zoning and our environmental issues and all kinds of issues. And I want to just agree with my husband's comments. And another problem with allowing non-residents to build these units is here in my neighborhood, where you have a workforce, year-round workforce rental housing. They're generally eyesores. They're not maintained. There's no pride of ownership. No one, the properties have a negative impact on their neighbors. So, I hope you'll take a second look at some of these things and really think it through. I don't believe that the ADUs can or should be the solution for our affordable housing problem, but I think it's better addressed by looking at an area like the pits and creating two-family housing with the appropriate septic, and you've already have property that's denuded of habitation, and just food for thought. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Carol. Jason, is there anyone else on the line?
We have no other callers.
Okay, so we'll move on to topics. First up is bids with Jeannie Carrozza. Welcome, Jeannie.
Good morning.
Good morning.
All right, the first bid to accept would be for the Carl Fisher House restoration. This is broken up into 4 contracts per Wick's Law. Contract A for the site and building work, Ronald Webb Builder is the apparent low bidder for that in the amount of $2,779,688. Next is contract B, plumbing, Island Piping and Solutions in the amount of $98,000. Contract C for the electrical is also Ronald Webb Builder in the amount of $393,404. And lastly, contract D for the HVAC, Ronald Webb Builder again in the amount of $409,903. So the grand total of all is $3,700,995. Next is the sports courts construction and resurfacing requirements contract. The Land Tech Group is the apparent low bidder for that in the amount of $581,060. And this will be broken up per proposal. It's an annual requirements contract. Next is Glock handguns and associated items for the police department. Armchair wholesale is the apparent low bidder for that bid in the amount of $101,152.50. This includes a trade-in credit of $35,960. And lastly, we have notices for several different projects. First is shade shelters for Montauk Skate Park and Fred W. Thiel Recreational Facility, Abraham's Path Comfort Station and site improvements, portable toilets rental and servicing, and printing of miscellaneous forms. And that's it.
Great. Does anyone have questions for Jeannie?
I just have a thank you to Jeannie for working on some of these bids that are some are novel for the town, but others are also going to provide great results to the town. So I thank you for working with me on that.
You're welcome. Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Jeannie. Okay, so before we launch into all 7 of our affordable housing topics today, I just want to briefly frame today's discussion. Housing affordability has become one of the defining challenges facing our community. When the people who work in our schools, for our town government, healthcare system, and local businesses cannot find affordable housing here, it affects the entire town. Today's work session brings together several proposals, including updates to the Route 114 project, improvements to our ADU program, and workforce housing ideas. There is no single solution to the housing challenges we face, which is why we continue to evaluate a range of options. So first up is the Route 114 Affordable Housing Market Study and Update, and we're going to be joined today by Brandon Gibbleman, who is the project manager for Empire State Development, and Arthur Samuel and Edward Lamson from BJH. So Jason, if you could bring those folks into the Zoom, and I believe, well, let me wait until they're up.
They're joining now as we speak. Give me a moment, and I'll make sure everything's set up.
Thank you. All right. Really bad shadow from the sun on that screen.
Okay, everybody, we're just waiting on Brandon to be joining in, but aside from that, everybody else looks like they are there.
Okay, well, Brandon was going to kick us off. So That's much better. Thank you, Jake.
Second, he's joining from a different device. Let me just make sure.
Great.
Brandon, can you hear us?
Yes.
Oh, fantastic, my friend. Fantastic.
All right. Well, welcome, gentlemen. Brandon, I think you were going to kick us off, were you not?
I was. Thank you so much, Supervisor, and thank you to the whole town board here. It's a great, if you don't know me, my name is Brandon Gimpelman. I'm a program manager with the Long Island Office of Empire State Development, specifically the manager of the Long Island Forward Housing Program, which is a technical assistance partnership program where we offer a number of services such as the market and feasibility study that we did for you on this project. This is a very new program, and this was our first project under this program, so we're very excited that you've allowed us to to work with you on this one. I just want to give a couple of quick thank yous to Supervisor Burke-Gonzalez, the whole town board, Katie Casey from the Housing Authority, Mark Morgan Perez, as well as Sam Klein, the former grants coordinator, who was super helpful getting this off the ground in the beginning. So I just wanted to thank you very much. And with that, I will turn it over to BJH, which is the team that was hired for this project. So take it away, Edward.
Thank you, Brandon.
Thank you.
Okay.
Are you able,
Hello.
welcome to the East Hampton. Are you able to share your screen to take us through the presentation? Or would you?
I believe so. Arthur, are you able to bring it up?
Yeah, let me know when everyone can see.
We can see it. Thank you, Arthur.
Okay. All right. And good morning, Supervisor Burke-Gonzalez, council members of the town board. My apologies, we can't be there in person today, but thank you for the opportunity to present. I'm Edward Lamson. I'm a principal at BJH. I'm also joined by my colleague, Arthur Samuel, and BJH is an urban planning and real estate advisory firm in New York City. We are also the state's lead urban planning consultant on Long Island for the Downtown Revitalization Initiative. So as Brandon mentioned, we're engaged by the town and the Housing Authority through ESD's Long Island Housing Forward program to conduct a market assessment and financial feasibility analysis of Route 114, or the site at Route 114. We understand the challenge as the town faces severe affordability challenges. Rising costs have displaced many year-round and seasonal residents, including young families, seniors, and local workforce. And housing mix and affordability is really critical to sustaining the town's community vibrancy and economy. So to that end, the goal of this project was really to update a 2020 market study that was conducted for 3 Mile Harbor and to estimate a funding gap for a potential housing development on Route 114, which has been the subject of prior planning studies from the town. So next slide. So this market assessment, it's been a flag. The market assessment focuses on 21 census tracts or areas in the town of East Hampton, as well as parts of eastern Southampton. And this was the same study area that was used in the town's last market report for 3 Mile Harbor, and which continues to be a representative market area. Similar to that report, we rely on various public and proprietary data sets, including the US Census, American Community Survey, Zillow, CoStar, and the town's own data. And we'll present a few of the highlight slides, but we've provided the full draft report for you to review as well. And we would also like to note that this presentation reflects year-round demographics and housing patterns, and they may not incorporate seasonal economy or populations, and that's just the nature of the data sets that we work with. We know that, because of the seasonal nature of a lot of the market dynamics, East Hampton is very different from most of Long Island municipalities. Next slide. The subject site is located at 776-780 Route 114, which is 2 sites making up 6.5 acres. The surrounding area is primarily single-family homes, and the closest multifamily property is over 3 miles away. The East Hampton Housing Authority is the owner of the site and recently completed a request for proposals process earlier this year, and is currently in contract with the developer team to design and build the development in accordance with an agreed upon design, budget, and schedule. Next slide. So the next few slides are just about socio-demographics and housing from our market report. In 2023, the study area population, which includes, again, town of East Hampton plus parts of Southampton, was 54,000, accounting for 4% of Suffolk County's population. From 2013 to 23, the population increased by 26% compared to 2% for Suffolk. And just for reference, the total population of the town is roughly around 28,000, while the additional, areas that we analyze in Southampton account for about 26,000. So the population reflects year-round residents and does not capture a seasonal population, which by our estimates of what the census has captured as seasonal housing, there's not an exact count, but an estimate would be around 50,000 based on what we know to be seasonal housing according to the census. Next slide. There are 21,000, just under 22,000 occupied housing units in the study area. 18% of those are renter occupied, 82% are owner occupied. Occupied housing only includes full-time housing again. Thus, according to the census, just under 21,000 households are counted as secondary or seasonal residences. So again, with the average household size of 2.4, that's how we got to about an estimate of 50,000 seasonal or secondary residents. Home values reported by the US Census are just over 1 million. Historically, the census has underestimated this stat. And for instance, on Zillow, recent asking sales listings in the study area, which tend to be more indicative of what's on the market or what's transacted, are closer to 2.4 million on average. Next slide. This is income. Oh, sorry, I think I kind of mentioned the housing value, but yeah, we can go to the next slide. Seasonal tenure. Seasonal population is estimated at 50,000, and a majority of workers are coming from, 57% of workers are coming from outside the study area, meaning that, the options for workers, or they're living further out from where they work. Median home value, again, 1 million, but before the listings, as I mentioned, are closer to 2.4 million. Household income is 135,000. And that results in we look at the ratio between home value to home income or household income. That puts it about 1 to 8. Suffolk County's home value is closer to 1 to 4, and affordable housing is typically around 1 to 3. So that's just a mismatch between local income and the home values in East Hampton. And that ratio is likely more disparate for what we would consider to be seasonal or temporary workers. Next slide. Of the 22,000 occupied household, just about 4,000 are rentals, with the median gross rent about 2,100 in the study area. Median rents can vary due to seasonal pricing that differs from the year-round rental rates. In terms of distribution, most of the stock in the study area is about 2 and 3 bedrooms, but there are very few studios and 1 bedrooms. Next slide. I think these are just a few slides about the multifamily market. In the study area in 2024, CoStar, which is a real estate listings database, tracked approximately 1,800 multifamily units in the study area. And based on that sample, the asking rent per unit approximates what's in the census. Median gross rents are about 2,000, and the vacancy rate is 3.2. So relatively stable and low vacancy. Next slide. There are 390 income restricted affordable housing units in the study area, or roughly 10% of the housing stock in East Hampton. And they range from 30% to about 130% of the area median income. 1 bedrooms account for 52% of the current stock, followed by 2 bedrooms accounting for 30% of the stock. 127 units are designated for seniors or age restricted, consisting of 92% 1 bedrooms. Windmill 1 is I think in the process of adding 20 additional units, which will all be 1 bedroom units. Next slide. Really key to addressing the town's affordable housing strategy is especially for smaller to 0 or studio to 2 bedroom needs are accessory dwelling units. There are a total of 61 accessory dwelling units in East Hampton, which are all rent restricted up to 130 fair market rents. There are 16 additional ADUs under construction or in the pipeline, and ADUs will house upwards of 250 individuals in studio to 2 bedroom units with an average occupancy of 1.25 persons per unit. Next slide. Area median income. So these are the area median income or AMI limits for Suffolk County in 2025. Residents earning 80% of the area median income would have rents ranging from $2,300 to $3,500. As a ceiling, the most that we would go for what we would say workforce housing is closer to 130% AMI, and those rent prices range from $37.51 to $57.88. The average study area rents are roughly in the range of 50 to 80% AMI in Suffolk County, so a bit less than kind of what the cap would be. Next slide. We also looked at market rents from various sources. So smaller units, studios, and 1 beds tend to be lower than 130 AMI. And this we're talking about market rents, and in some cases lower than 80% AMI, depending on the source. Larger units, 2 and 3 bedrooms, have market asking rents that exceed 130 AMI. So it's just a bit of variability depending on the unit size. Okay, and then Arthur Samuel, my colleague, will we'll walk you through some of the construction costs and financial feasibility analysis that we did.
All right. Thank you, Edward. Okay, so we looked at construction costs for existing recent multifamily projects within our area, and we looked at the total cost, and the total development cost ranges from $24 million to $35 million, with total construction costs ranging from $7 million to $21 million. And I will note that the total development costs for all three of the recent developments, except Southampton, include the land acquisition costs. Next, we look at the proposals that Edward mentioned that were submitted to the Housing Authority for the site. And for the 3 proposals that were received, the development costs estimated between $15 million to $24.5 million for 44 to 50 unit sites, with the cost per unit ranging from $300,000 to $500,000 per unit. And I will note that none of these development costs include the purchase or cost of land. So next, we looked at operating expense within the existing housing authorities portfolio, and the operating expense ranged from $7.29 to $15.35 per square foot, with an average coming out to $12.27, and with a weighted average of $12,632 per unit for operating expense. Next, we're going to move into the financial analysis of this site. So BJH developed a discount cash flow model to determine the cash flow for a real estate project, and also look at potential investment returns and ultimately assessing the potential project funding gaps. And essentially what we're doing with this model is looking at the feedback from the Housing Authority, the developer proposals, and the budget from the owner's rep, and our own research to assess the site. So we're going to go through a list of inputs to the model. So for operating expense, we relied on the most recent data from Gardner's Point, a recent development within East Hampton. And so we used their high assumptions for the operating expense, so that $12,172 per unit was the high based on Gardner's Point, and we used a variance of 10 to 20% to determine medium and low with a toggle within the model for different scenarios. Next, we looked at income and expense inputs into the model. So rents were based on 60 to 100% AMI, based on Suffolk County, Nassau and Suffolk counties AMI with a growth rate of 3% every year in the model. And for unit mix, these scenario 1, 2, and 3s were based on the developer's proposals, the town and housing authority feedback, and also feedback from the advisory board. Next is sources and uses input. So per the budget from the owner's rep, as mentioned, the current budget is 22.8 million for a 44 unit structure. This does not include the purchase of the land, the cost of the land, sorry. And currently the project has $7,842,000 committed in funding, with an additional $6 million in funding pending from the Community Housing Fund. And based on the model assumptions, the max loan that the project can carry is approximately $14.8 million, or about 65% of project costs. While the town may utilize bonds or bond anticipatory notes, we assume a commercial loan for a conservative estimate. And many of these initial assumptions or estimates is based on this point, and we will continue to develop this as the owner's rep develop the budget and the development process continues. And for the last couple of slides, we looked at the outputs of the model. So based on the previous slides of all the inputs into this model, the funding gaps range from a little bit over $8 million to $11.2 million, depending on the AMI and the scenario unit mix. And when we add in the additional $6 million from the community fund, if that goes through, the gaps range from about $1 million to $4 million, depending on the unit mix again and the AMI ranges. And again, these values may fluctuate as additional funding comes in. The construction budget continues to be updated, and financial approaches are solidified, whether the town goes with bonds versus commercial loans. But this is based on best estimates and the anticipated information that we have from the market report. And that was basically our study.
Okay.
Or maybe we can go back one slide. But yes, again, thank you to the board. And we would also like to thank Katie Casey and Mark Morgan Perez for all their feedback as we developed this analysis. And with that, we're happy to take any questions. Sorry, I know that was fast, but we had to.
I was just going to say, you flew through that. Fortunately, both the interim report and all of the documents are on the town website. And maybe what we'll do is in our work session materials, but maybe Mark will also have a link from your page so people can find it easily. Do board members have questions for Edward or Arthur? No, there's a lot here to process.
Yeah, I mean, there's one interesting one for me, which is, you report in the demographics that since 2013, we've seen a 26% increase in the population that's recorded out here. That's year-round population, to be clear. And a 22% increase in housing growth. So we have not been keeping up with the housing needs that's come with the population growth. What that also potentially tells me that I don't really see in the data here, but I wonder if you could give some insight into is, has the share of second home ownership increased dramatically in that period? And if so, is there insight into impacts of that on not just housing prices and rental rates, but also just the general cost of living and affordability on the East End?
I don't think we have the change from 2010 quite yet, but I think we can definitely add that into the final report. So we could get back on the 2013-23 change, because I think we're using the 10-year period. So I think, sorry, I don't have an answer to that piece, but it's definitely something that we can get pretty quickly.
Thank you.
To the second point, I think, you know, I think that's probably the likely inference from all this data that, like, I mean, what we would probably expect to see is probably an increase in all, I think, I mean, I haven't looked it up, but I think it's likely that it's probably an increase across all areas because that's what we've seen, and that they're definitely both related. The increase in the rent is probably tied to the influx or lack thereof of, you know, affordable options for both the secondary commuters. As we've seen, you know, more, I think what we have also seen is, like, you know, even though I don't have that data point, there has been the increase in, you know, workers and the secondary population that is also not coming or living in the study area. So I think we can assume that it's tied to the fact that, you know, there's just not really affordable options, and that, as you mentioned, the housing stock is not keeping up with the pace of population growth.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the information. I think there's just a couple input lines that might have been missed, maybe on smaller projects that we have done. The only one I can really think of, one of the ones I think of right now is 109 Hampton Street. Even though it's within the township, it's still within the village of Sag Harbor. Katie, you could probably get that information to them. It's a small one. It's about 4 units on there. But overall, you're pretty much expressing in this report what I thought was happening out here then too. There's a dire need for affordable housing. The cost of living and the cost of building only keep escalating out there. Thank you.
Hi, Kate Rogers. Thank you for this presentation and all this data. It does take a bit of time to absorb it, but I have some questions. On slide 10 or page 10, where you're talking about rental households and you're describing median gross rents, is that market rate? Or is that affordable housing rates?
So this is what's reported by the census, and I think what what we always find, both the rents and also housing value typically are lower than what we would usually expect compared to, like, asking rents or asking sales price. So that's why we always kind of look to the other data sets, like, you know, Zillow or CoStar, kind of these, you know, aggregators of what's on the market or what's currently being transacted. So the gross rents, that is really for all housing, so inclusive of affordable and market across the board. And that's what's reported by the census. If we look kind of, I think, at other sources, I think we might have had it on another slide, but depending on what the unit type, you know, the market rents on, like, let's say Zillow, or what's, you know, on CoStar, these kind of like aggregators of what's listed, you know, the rents tend to be a lot higher.
Yeah, they are a lot higher. That's why I'm asking this question on slide 10, because if the median gross income by unit type were the rents listed here, I don't think we need to build affordable housing. So I don't know where there's one of the impacts that we're seeing here, and one of the questions, and Tom had asked it as well, is if there was analysis of different types of rental. We're seeing different types of rental models coming into the town rather than the traditional year-round or what was seasonal. We're seeing the short-term rental market as well. So now when I look at Zillow, it's a rare house that I find that is less than $5,000 a month. That's maybe 2, and then it jumps considerably to $10,000, $20,000 a month as well. Yeah. So I just wanted to ask about these figures because I haven't seen prices like this.
Yeah,
exactly. A very long time ago.
No, exactly. And, you know, that's also why, you know, we saw from the census, you know, the median housing value is 1 million, but really when you go to Zillow, it's closer to 2.4. So I think here we have kind of the aggregate of, you know, studio 1 beds, 2 beds, and 3s. And so as you can see, Zillow average, you know, it's already the studio is 2,200, so it's already above. And then if you look at the 3 bedrooms, it's into the 7,000s plus. And so a much higher for sure. And, I think these are more indicative of market rents or what's being transacted. But, historically, the census figures have tended to be on a conservative or much lower range. So I think this is just more kind of gives you a bit of color as to what different sources or what different data sets are saying.
Thank you.
I think also there's a possibility here that this data point could get skewed because, as we have ADUs in the town, the rent that can be charged from them might be zero. Or $1 because it's going to a family member, for multifamily housing. That data point has to be included in the data potentially, which might skew this down to what it actually truly is. Because I agree with you, Kate. I think these numbers are way off what I understand the local market to be.
Right. And it says in parens on slide 10, 2023. So is that the 2023 rates?
Yeah, so this is from, this is from like US Census and what's between so the census is conducted every 10 years. And then in the interim, we have what's called the American Community Survey. So the most recent, they in the past month, they just released the 24 data. We're kind of on a delayed, data release. So at the time that we conducted this study, we pulled what was the most recent data or public data set, which is the American Community Survey for 2023. We now have the 2024 data, so we could update, as much as we can to the 2024. But 2024 is the largest, public data set that we have. And then obviously Zillow, CoStar, those are, real estate databases that are updated to current. So, that's kind of why we wanted to present, our standard is to always present the official public data sets, but also, we want to couch that with providing you also with, the most recent that we also have is based on kind of these proprietary or these databases that are also available. So it kind of tells you the full story by having all these different, the combination of sources, I would say.
Okay, thank you. Also on page 44, seasonal tenure.
Sure.
The number that you have for East Hampton study area year-round population is 54,081. I thought we were around 28.
That's because it includes Southampton, right?
Oh,
The
okay.
census tracks.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, that's correct. So what we took was the study area from a prior, we were basically updating a lot of these data points from the last time the town underwent a market report like this was about 5 years ago. We used the same study area, which includes parts of eastern Southampton, just because, it's the combined market is probably representative of the general housing market across East Hampton.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you. I didn't realize this was the first study as part of this program, but I think East Hampton, we're certainly grateful for it. I think it's incredibly important, not only for the 114 project, but it'll also shed a lot of light on what we need to do with affordable housing generally. I think often there's a rub or friction between addressing a problem that to me is just very apparent. And I think anybody paying attention to housing in East Hampton realizes that we have a problem that we need to address, and sometimes there's friction between, how long you want to take with a study and actually making meaningful progress on the issue itself. And you guys have come forward with this very, very quickly, which I'm grateful for, because I'm a believer that we have to keep making progress on the problem that I know exists, but at the same time to have this data to sort of direct and guide us on what type of projects we're going to do, or how the 114 projects looks and other projects is very, very helpful. I do have one comment, which is on the funding gap page. I don't think we addressed the 130% AMI, and my understanding is that is what we're gearing the 114 project towards. It would probably be fairly easy to add that, but it would be nice to see, because of course, as you get into higher AMI levels, the funding gap becomes more difficult, and that funding sources are hard to find. but of course, rents are a little bit higher. So I would like to see what that looks like. And that's really all I have on this. I'm again grateful for all the people you said thank you to that helped make this happen, but also your team and anybody at the state that helped. I think there's often a misconception about East Hampton because there is a lot of wealth here that, you know, we don't have an affordability problem or a housing problem. People don't think of the fact that we have a really desperate affordable housing crisis. And so I'm grateful for your work on this, and I think it's going to help us going forward.
And could I just have a question? It's on page 55 of the longer deck, and it's the stakeholder takeaways. So obviously you guys, you know, have really dug in deep here as to our market. And, you know, as we work on our next project, I guess I kind of look at it through that lens. What do we, you know, we've got Route 114, that's a moderate income. Am I using the right word, Katie? You know, up to 130% AMI because we only have one other housing community like that, and that's Springs Fireplace Road, and that's 13 one-bedrooms and 13 two-bedrooms. So we've only got 26 units in that 130% AMI, which is why the board wanted to move forward on 114 with that kind of composition. But what should we be looking for as we tee up our next project, right? I know you took a deep dive into the lists that the Housing Authority has, and I'm guessing so does Windmill Development Corp have for their projects. If you were the decision maker sitting at this dais, what would you recommend for our next project?
Well, a couple things. I think the housing waiting list is, I think, primarily 1, 2. And so, I mean, you know, and that kind of is based more on who is signing up for it. You know, the need could be more in 2s and 3s, but I think just based on your wait list, it is geared more towards the 1s and 2s. The other part of it, I know, you know, it is not unique to me, but there is probably a substantial aging, and there was another slide, I think, later, maybe it's like 36 or so, you know, there is an aging problem. So aging in place is really crucial. And, you know, same, I think it was mentioned, you know, there is a misconception that it is, you know, wealthy, but a lot of wealthy seniors. That's also not the case. It's like there's a lot of seniors in the town that, you know, are also being priced out. So I think age-restricted housing is really crucial to, you know, the dignity of aging in place and aging in the place that you've spent many years in. But yes, just by those 2 data points alone, I would say, you know, we have to get more seniors housing. We have to get more 1s and 2s for like the folks who are, that would be more geared, I think, towards younger populations and professional populations that want to stay. And we're not talking like necessarily, I think the key thing about all of this is also the AMI. You know, we're not talking, you know, we are also thinking of like workforce housing. You know, you can price it. We're not saying like market, but also not deeply affordable. And that kind of middle income is missing in a lot of communities and is missing from the focus of a lot of affordable housing. So I guess that's another third set, like this middle income housing. I know you just mentioned it, Supervisor, but that is really, I think, the direction that, you know, we should, you know, just based on what we've seen, what I would probably say. So just,
yeah. So Edward, to recap, you're saying more senior housing, more 1 and 2 bedroom units, and looking at middle income.
Looking at middle income, because like where the AMI stands, you know, I think that's it's a question about, the types of diversity of housing and diversity of income levels as well, because affordability, there's a wide band, even within that, deeply affordable up until workforce. So, and frequently what gets left out of the conversation is kind of the workforce and the middle income housing. And we are definitely not creating enough of that, not only in the Hamptons, but also on the island itself. So throughout Long Island, I think that is sort of the challenge, because as a developer, you could either take the subsidies to create deeply affordable, or you could just build market rate, and kind of this middle gets left out of the conversation. So I think that's really, the challenge. And I think, especially here, given the makeup of the workforce and seasonal population that, and also the costs of living out in East Hampton and kind of in the study area, you would want to look more into, we're looking at all housing, obviously, but the middle income is definitely a concern, I would say, and something a challenge. So to continue to look at.
Yeah, I would completely echo that sentiment. And, look, I think we see this operationally. I think many of you big municipal or healthcare operators out here face this challenge of, people who work being able to live out here, and the knock-on effects that creates in the community, from traffic, which we'll hear a lot about soon as the season heats up, and just the ability to fulfill critical functions. In the sanitation department, we've cut positions. The highway department, the guys and the girls operating in that department during the last storm were really stretched, and getting more people into that department is critical, and finding them housing is critical, because I think there's a shift happening certainly within IT. We're seeing it ourselves with OpenGov that some aspects of operations we can designate to software and IT, but certain critical functions, we have to have people living here to operate the town. And I think that workforce housing is absolutely critical. And I agree that it's been underlooked in the past.
Yeah, and I agree with you on the looking at the middle income completely at approximately $135,000 a year. And another aspect of this is what's happened in our town is that market. No one's building for that market anymore. East Hampton was always a place where you had a range of house size, a range of house costs, but we're seeing with the median income going up to over $2 million, no one is building housing for that market anymore. That middle market, the employees, the staffing, the critical infrastructure of the town, actually. So as we see most new construction coming in much larger than that, much more expensive than that, I think it's I agree with my colleagues and you that it's critical to build to that market.
All right. Well, I just want to thank you gentlemen, Brandon, Edward, and Arthur, for joining us today, taking us through this study. And I know the Housing Authority, they had a meeting on Thursday, the Board of Commissioners, and they're really doing a deep dive into this study, and I'm sure there'll be more that we learn from it. So, Katie, I trust that as this evolves, you'll share with us what your findings are. So thank you again, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
So next up is our special counsel, Ed Reale. He's going to be leading a discussion on accessory staff housing. Tom, I don't know if Ian, if you wanted to set this up at all.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be having this discussion. This is the first look at an idea that's been, I think, talked about for some time, and most recently it's been discussed publicly as part of other affordable housing conversations, that people who own land and businesses who want to address their own housing needs for their employees on site have asked that, we try to accommodate that. And I think, very loosely, the board has been supportive in concept. It's just very difficult to actually turn a concept into code that both allows for what you want to allow for and doesn't have loopholes that allow for other types of developments that are not desirable. I want to thank Mark Morgan Perez, for the housing director, for his work on this, Tina Lagaran, the planning director, for her work, and I especially want to recognize, Ed Reale, who did a lot of heavy lifting and has just been so helpful on this topic and on other affordable housing issues, and Eric Shantz from the planning department, who really did a lot of the details here. I'm supportive of this legislation. Like anything that comes before the board the first time, there are going to be changes, I'm sure. So I welcome input from the board members, obviously, and anybody in the public who either thinks positively or negatively about this, or might be somebody who would want to use this. Let us know, what you think, and then I hope to bring this back soon. I think, as that last conversation indicated, we have a real need for housing, workforce housing. This middle income is a lost target for us, that we just aren't doing enough for it. And the idea of producing legislation that would allow for, private funding to take care of this problem in some way is I think a really great thing. So thank you, Ed, and everybody involved, and I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you. Good morning, members of the board. Mr. Turner. I don't think, you all have a memo from me on this. I don't think we need, given your agenda today, to go into the need. It's clear from today that there's a desperate need for housing. This singles out, there has been a demand within the town for employee housing by local businesses who could put some housing on their properties. And that's what this local law was intended to address. What we've given you here now is a new local law, that the idea being that within someone's business within the town, they could create either a single family home, apartments, or a rooming house within that property. Now, all this is going to be subject to not only the zoning of that district that the property is in, but also the health department's septic load density rules, which is key, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. So the main thrust of this initiative is to create a way for private businesses to put some housing on their own property at their own expense. There's no public investment in this. I think before we discuss the actual details of what this entails, we had to work very hard, and Eric was very helpful with all this in trying to figure out the flexibility of this. Every single business property is going to be different, and we're trying to address with one local law the different zoning areas, different groundwater management zones, different sizes of properties, different needs. And then the key issue, the one that will really limit the ultimate use of this and will affect every single number that we come to talk about, is really the Suffolk County's, what they call their density load statistics. So for example, if you have a private business that has a certain use, the health department assigns a particular gallonage to that use, whether it's a restaurant or a hotel or a farm, everything has something assigned to it, and it's based on the size of the use and their calculations for expected uses. So anyone coming in to apply for this special permit is coming in with that use already taking up some space as far as what they can do as far as the septic load. Since we don't have public sewer systems here, this is key to what would be allowed. If there's public water, that could help very much in the calculation. So the health department is going to look at every single property, and they're going to look at what the original business is doing as far as their usage, and then that will dictate how much housing actually can be added. So all the numbers that we talk about and that we've put forth in the local law are really subject to that limitation. That's a floating limitation based on a lot of factors. The type of use, the zone, the groundwater zone, the size of the property. So the actual number of units that were permitted is going to be a function of that, and we can't predict that in talking about it today. As far as the site requirements that the local law suggests, will be permitted by a special permit in all residential zones B through A10 and all commercial zones, except for those uses designated in the use table as industrial uses. I mean, we took the position that those, you don't want houses built in some of those rougher industrial uses. But everywhere else in town, it would be a special permit, subject to site plan, special permit, and ARB approval.
But not Parks and Conservation.
But not Parks and Conservation, no.
And may I just ask, right there, because I'll lose my train of thought as you go on. This is meant to be for businesses, for commercial properties, correct?
Commercial uses, yes.
Commercial uses. So the idea that this would be okay in all the residential zones, B through A10, is if there's commercial use on a property in that zone?
I'd answer that with yes. Yeah. However, we've also provided that non-conforming uses would not qualify for this. So if you have a non-conforming use, you can't expand it within that zone. But if there is something that the residential zone permits, it could be done. Agriculture comes to mind to me immediately, and there may be some other permitted uses within the table of uses for residential, but not non-conforming uses.
And not obviously residential homes.
No, this is strictly for business.
Okay, I just want to clarify that.
Yes.
Thanks.
That's the intention anyway, yes. We've arrived at a number, we've had conversations with the health department before coming here so that we have a sense of what they would look at and how this would work. The proposed local law that's in front of you has a limit of 16 people per property, no matter its size or whatever. That would be the upper limit that would be allowed. And again, it would be allowed in different combinations. It could be within a rooming house, which could have 16 rooms, or 8 rooms with 2 people, or if they can get the septic flow that they need, or in an apartment between 300 and 1,200 square feet, a house between 600 and 1,200 square feet, and a rooming house where the rooms would be 70 feet for singles and 100 for a double room. But a maximum number of 16 occupants either way. The setbacks and coverage would all be whatever the zoning district is that the business finds itself in. And it's an accessory use only. So you can't put housing on something that doesn't already have a business under this special permit. It needs to be accessory to the principal business use. Again, non-conforming properties are not eligible, and probably worth repeating many, many times because it's an important factor in doing this. It's all subject to the density load calculations by the health department.
Ed, just quickly, you said 16 people per unit maximum?
No. 16 units, 16 people per property.
16 people per property, right. Okay.
And that, again, subject to other restrictions. But that's the most you could have at under the most helpful circumstances to the business. On a 1 acre lot, that's probably not going to happen.
Right.
By the way, we've said that the minimum size to start with is at least 1 acre to begin with, as a minimum size for this permit.
So can I just ask, do we have a definition for rooming house?
We do now.
That's yeah.
That's what this is. Yeah, and where did the 16 come from? Is that from the county, or is that something that that was a deliberation that you had before you came to us?
All those things.
Okay.
So the rooming house, within the proposed local law, there is a new definition for the code for rooming house, which we've essentially taken from the health department regulations.
Got it.
And we use that word, that term, because that's what the health department uses. So rather than call it something else and have it clash with the health department, we use that particular word. I mean, it could be more than a rooming house. It could be somewhere where there's shared facilities, a shared kitchen, shared common space. But we're using the health department's term. The 16 units, 16 people basically is somewhat arbitrary, but did come out of a look at really how many people could you really expect to get on, say, a 2 acre piece, given the prior business use, density load, and some housing. And we picked that as a somewhat arbitrary, but it does fit into about a 2 acre use. I mean, it's subject to the board's, but that's what we're suggesting. We've put the maximum rent charged at the 130% of AMI, just like you have in a lot of the other provisions in the code. No income restrictions in what we've proposed. Again, going back to some of the conversation you had today, a business may want to put key employees in there who are not at a lower income level,
Right.
or put laborers in. So we didn't include an income restriction in this. It could address the middle in some ways that we were just talking about.
Right.
So our suggestion is no income limits. The restrictions we're proposing to put on this to try to keep some control over it is there will have to be a lease. The lease will have to be at least 90 days. Sometimes you're going to have some seasonal or part-time employees. No more than a year, so we don't have a problem of this extending too far and somebody having a 5-year lease. The tenant needs to be an employee of the business on that property. There has to be that relationship in order for this to work. We're suggesting that we're going to make a condition of, it's within the local law, that the tenant, that the employee, the occupant, is a tenant under the New York State real property law, so that there's no question that they're not a licensee, they're under a guest or some other legal arrangement. So that tenant will have the rights, all the rights any tenant has in New York State as an occupant of a house under a lease. So if you have a dispute with your landlord, there are some tenant protections. And we've also added a 30-day extension so that if someone's terminated in their employment, they have 30 days before that clock even starts. So to provide some control over the concern about the housing not being stable or protective of the occupants of the tenants. And then we've added a provision that everyone has to get a permit. Any applicant for this has to get a permit from the housing office. So we have some control and management and awareness of following that. They have to come in each year with a new lease and report in on the progress and what's going on there. So we'd have some oversight there. I mean, that's essentially it. It is a new way to, as the supervisor said earlier today, there's no single solution. This is a solution, a possible solution, something that's been considered by the comprehensive plan 20 years ago, talked about something similar to this, an overlay district that was never acted upon by the town boards then. So we don't have anything like this that provides housing for business. Having people live locally will help with them being involved in the community, using local stores and businesses and being part of the schools and other events. So that's the thinking behind doing this.
Could I just ask a question?
Yeah, can we make sure that Eric Shantz is in? I don't know if he's in the meeting or not, just because he had an important hand in this too, so he might.
Oh, yeah, he absolutely did.
Yeah, I don't think he's in.
Jason, is Eric Shantz?
So just while we're waiting
One
for
moment,
Eric,
please. Sorry.
I want to really thank you and the whole team, including Eric, for looking at this and coming up with, I think, a very sensible solution. For me, workforce housing sited at the employer's resident, at the business solves a number of issues and also takes care of some of the guardrails that I'm always worried about for abuse, for things turning into market rate rentals, et cetera. Employers need housing for their businesses, and to allow employers to house workers on their property, to me, is a really great step forward in this crisis. I think it's sensible what you've come up with in terms of density, everything, and of course, being tied to the Suffolk County is something we're all aware of. Now, if a business also has property for a sewage treatment plant, would they be able to? The density would still be at 16. We're not looking to put sewage treatment plants on top of properties.
Correct. I mean, sewage treatment plants are extremely expensive. You need a lot of tenants, a lot of people living there to make that, to justify that. But aside from that, we eliminate it to 16. We don't, also, we're trying to keep the density within any one property at a certain limit as well.
Yeah, I'm happy to see this, this iteration and look forward to moving it forward in discussion and eventually public hearing.
Yeah, I think it's a really good piece to move forward. I do have 1 or 2 questions. I mean, when I think of the commercial businesses I know throughout the different hamlets, most of them are leased by people as opposed to owning the properties themselves. So is there a pathway for business owners who are lessees of said properties to be engaged with this, or is this really always going to be for the landowner themselves?
We haven't addressed that question. Personally, I think if there's a proper lease and it's a long-term lease, if a business wants to invest in creating that housing, obviously it wouldn't be any good beyond the length of a business's lease. But if it met all the other requirements, I don't see why it couldn't be done.
Okay, thank
you. With the approval of obviously, of the landowner.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're going to need site plan and all of that. I mean, this is going to get a lot of review.
Okay, thank you. Ian, thank you very much. And Ed also. The memorandum is wonderful. For myself, I think this is another level of how the town boards continue to move forward on all different types of designs, novel or such, to our affordable housing crisis. Ed, you mentioned the comp plan 2005. This completely matches what I believe in goal 4 and goal 5 of that comp plan. The size, I believe, of the 1 acre zoning that we're looking at is a guardrail to start at right now. But again, that seasonal overlay, seasonal employee overlay district, those are specifically in Montauk and some of the areas around the harbor and such, where there's smaller properties like that. That could be something that we can use some of these template things, bring that back, because that might encapsulate those smaller pieces of property, less than 1 acre. But it's a great place to start right now. And maybe that might be the next stop, pass the baton. And again, we bring that back because that would help some of the smaller properties that I think we might get some gain out of. Questions, details, I think, if you don't mind me just talking out. The non-conforming issue here, because there's many businesses that actually are commercial businesses that are actually pre-existing non-conforming, that are businesses in residential districts on there. I don't know how we're going to address that, because many of those businesses, Montauk, Napeague, and other areas, will also probably like to join into this type of need for seasonal, because many of them are hotels where you need a large number of employees too. So I want to see how that can maybe potentially be addressed in here, but maybe that's something separate to this or a different layer of that special permit on there. I actually don't mind personally having this allowed in some of the in the industrial zone properties also. Industrial properties that we might have, either from anything that could be in Wainscott to Springs or other areas, they need employees also. And that might be something that I wouldn't mind considering to also allow in the industrial format, because those are some of the locations that do have larger properties over the 1 acre on there, and there could be a benefit to them. So I personally would like to continue to look into the positives of doing that instead of excluding industrial zone properties. We have a lot of those in Montauk, but some of those are actually smaller than 1 acre.
Can I just to be clear on that?
Please.
Excuse me. It's permitted by special permit in the CI and CS zones, but under the use table, there are certain specific, what are called industrial uses, which are more unpleasant uses.
Tanneries?
The town, yeah, that sort of thing. There are things we don't even have a lot of them,
Sure.
an abattoir or a distillery or whatever. But I guess we have some distillery. But it was those in particular. It wasn't a blanket, no CI, CS. I mean, you might want to look, I don't have it with me right now, but just that one category, not business uses and not commercial uses, but what are called industrial uses.
Okay.
Even though it's the CI zone.
I'll have to re-review that. I appreciate that clarity on
sort
that.
of the more harsher uses within that zone.
Okay, I'll look into that again, but thank you for that clarity. A couple of details on here, if you don't mind looking at. A 2,000 square foot house on an acre property on there, I believe, for a maximum of 3 bedrooms is a little larger than I would be wanting to see, particularly if it was 2,000 square feet. You know, it's going to be difficult to actually make that with your lot coverage on a piece of property. They also within this is that it's a minimum of 1 bedroom, including a shower for every 6 occupants. There's 6 in my house, including 4 daughters. That would be a nightmare every morning or evening time. So that's a small little detail. I would probably say at least two bathrooms in there, on there. If this is for seasonal workforce housing, people are working hard. And I think that just, you know, that I understand the communal use, but there's also a part that's just reality. I think 2 bathrooms minimum for that would be fine. Sorry, you know, it's a minor thing. Yeah. Again, we could continue to.
I think it's good experience that you're speaking from. David.
I mean, how am I going to do my hair? You know. So the 70 square feet for a 1-person bedroom. I thought the town code was 100 square feet minimum for 1-person bedroom. I would want to just check on that to make sure that matches the town code. On there. These and I would want to make sure that these units, when built, that the bedrooms also with proper egress would be able to be allowed in basements too, on there. So I don't know if that needs to have clarity in there, or if that's all right within our standard building also.
Well, I mean, it's all subject to the building and fire code.
Thank you.
It's not prohibited right now.
It's not prohibited if there's 2 means of egress.
Sure. Reconfirming. Parking, I think the parking's a little light on there right now. If it's 1 bedroom, knowing that most of these individuals might be working on the property, but some of them might also have cars. So I want to try to find out how if there's 1 parking per space per family home or such. I know there's going to be a total lot area, but I don't mind also looking at the parking calculations for the businesses that will already be on site to have shared parking on there then too. Is there a way to do that, or a way to do seasonal parking which is in the town code, which might not be an asphalted parking, it might be a grass designated area. That's something that I know we were looking in the Hamlet studies, how to share parking, but I want to make sure that that could be either designed or discussed on there. Lastly, is that all units be subject to inspection by building code, fire marshal, building department, community housing and development also. As I think enforcement is going to be a main thing on here. I know that you mentioned in here the lease if there's a lease renewal of 90 days, that lease has to be brought back every single time to the housing office on there. I think that's appropriate, and of course that's more work to the housing department, but it comes back to the enforcement of this to make sure it's regulated fairly across the board, not just through site plan, but post-site plan, moving ahead into actual use. Overall, I'm very happy to see this. I think there's ways we can continue to move on this. It's very similar to when we allowed more housing in LBOs or other zonings in the basement and other sort of locations. But it's a great start, and I thank you, Ed, for putting this forward. It's just some minor touches in the details. And maybe I got too much into the details initially, but at least I gave you my direction.
No, thank you. I mean, we struggled with some of those issues in our group as well. So.
So, a couple questions. Was this brought to the Community Housing Advisory Board? Have they looked at this local law?
They have
weighed in or no?
They have not, but it's not anticipated that this would be funded by them because there's no income restriction. So it's not. I mean, look, I've got a great deal of respect for that committee, and we talk about all sorts of things, but this particular legislation has not gone before them.
I would be comfortable with them looking at it.
Oh, 100%.
So get their input before it comes back to us.
Sure.
And that would be helpful. So this was really thoughtfully done, Ed. Thank you. I'm grateful you joined our team, quite frankly. In your research, did you find any other communities across the country that have this type of legislation on the books?
Across the country, yes. And there's a lot of variations on it. California has state regulations that allow for this. Other states do. I couldn't find anything that specifically does this in such a specific way on Long Island. Southampton has does permit some housing on property, but no one has sort of dug into a very specific set of rules for that. No, I didn't find anything particular about that.
All right, great.
Can I just ask one more question? I apologize, I didn't. If the need or the use of this accessory aspect ceases to be used, are we giving the property owner a certain time frame to conform with the structure or remove the structure? Meaning if we're allowing the property owner to potentially add on a 2,000 square foot structure on the property for housing, but they're not meeting the so certain standards anymore on there, what happens with that structure?
Well, under the rule as it is, they would lose their special permit and site plan approval. They could conceivably convert it to something else that would require a new site plan. In the case of abandonment, that's a good question, and maybe we should address that in the law.
Just eyes wide open as we go.
Yeah.
Can I, you mind if I, oh, so go ahead, Tom.
Please go ahead.
No, I'm just want to address some of the things that were talked about, so I'll go last.
One question on the lease term of 90 days. I mean, look, I think a lot of employers out here are very seasonal in their employee needs. Is the 90 days kind of in reference to that, or is there a pathway for those kind of large seasonal employers to access this type of housing?
Well, we were presuming that the seasonal employees would work at least 90 days.
Okay.
I mean, you know, whether it's agriculture or the hospitality industry, you would expect them to be here from April, May to September, October, possibly.
Yeah.
Our seasonal is May 15th to September 15th, right, when we hire seasonal full-time employees.
The main thrust of trying to have a lease is for tenant protection. Really.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
And then I just see that in the legislation, it calls for the total number of special permits would not exceed 25. That would be across the town.
That's a suggestion.
Right.
Part of that had to do with the environmental impact of passing a rule like this. If we didn't put some limit on it, the planning department would have to assess every single business that could qualify for this within their assessment, and would be pretty hard to figure out. So we put a limit on it for purposes of this first draft of the law.
I think that's important too, as we look at the staffing required to regulate. And I see that I think that's important to do, and we can always up it as we see it come in, but it also gives the staff time and the building department and every department time to evaluate, go to the next step, and then come back with recommendations so that we can change it in a way that works better.
Yeah, Eric, are you in the meeting, by the way?
I am here. How is everyone?
Good. I don't know. I was going to address some of the things that came up, but I don't know if you have anything to add before I do.
I don't. I guess one thing that came up when the question was being asked about other municipalities, which, Ed gave the correct answer there, which is we didn't find anything completely analogous. I was going to say, and this also isn't a perfect analogy, but, the town code right now does permit, certainly in a much more limited sense, but does in a number of avenues permit what is essentially accessory staff housing. There's a provision, I know, for a marina, where a marina is allowed to have a home on the property as an accessory to the main marina use for the marina manager. A lot of our apartments within commercial structures are used as staff housing for the on-site business. That's one thought I had just to add to this. But yeah, I don't know if there's a specific item that was discussed that you want me to weigh in on.
I think the other thing about this is that it's clear to the person renting, to the employee, that this is housing based on their employment. They're on the property. I think there's no presumption of, maybe this is longer term housing. And I think that's important. And I think that's why this is also a good to have it on location. It's clear right from the beginning, this is totally tied to your employment. And the season, I agree with the seasonality of it as well, because we do want to encourage employment for the entire season rather than, a month and picking up somebody else. Or I think it's for stability as well. I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Yeah, we just want to thank everybody for their very thoughtful comments. And David, that's never too detailed. I think it's important to get details out because we want to make this better, and there's always room for improvement. And I again want to really profusely thank Eric Shantz and Ed Reale for how much work you put into this. It was a lot. I just want to address a few things that came up, many of which came up in our conversations as this code was drafted. The limit of 25, as was already said, was really just to put some guardrails up so that the perceived impact, even though it's unlikely that this is going to proliferate based on other restrictions, just to be very, very clear and to make sure the environmental impact was not, through this one action too great. We talked about the comp plan and how it called for seasonal housing. And I think that this is important. I know that there's been some resistance to seasonal housing or skepticism of seasonal housing taking over other affordable housing. I think that's a valid concern. What this does is sort of recognize it as a category in and of itself that is not going to compete with other year-round affordable housing. And I think that that's important. Similarly, the rooming house idea, we drew that from Suffolk County because, and that could be thought of also as a dormitory. We don't want to be cramming everything into single-family homes when that's not the actual makeup of the use. Currently, I think employers will buy single-family homes, but it's not used as a family unit. And this just recognizes that and perhaps allows for developments more consistent with the actual use. We did meet with the health department too, and I again thank Eric for setting that up to make sure that what we were doing here was in fitting with what their code calls for, and it was. That was a very productive meeting. In terms of an income restriction, that's something we also talked about, and frankly, I could go either way on that, but I don't anticipate these to be luxury units based on the fact that they're on a business's property. And another consideration there is, do we want the Office of Housing having to vet everybody's income if it's a non-issue? So this remains an open topic, but the thought was, in my opinion, if we don't charge too much rent, there's not a lot of room for abuse here, and it didn't make sense to add that workload or that extra layer of sort of enforcement for an issue that might not be important. I think the lease term is really important. We've talked about that a bit. 90 days, I think, recognizes what's reasonably seasonal as opposed to transient. And then we put the cap of a year, which sounds odd, but what we didn't want to have happen is, remember, this is an accessory use. We don't want a business to sell and then the housing to stay. This is all use-based. If the business leaves, the accessory staff housing has to leave. And so, whether it's somebody who owns it, leases it, it's all tied to the use, and nothing about it is grandfathered in. The only thing that would grandfather in the persistence of the housing would be somebody's lease. Also importantly, I know there's going to be concerns about, stability and all of that, but as Ed pointed out, but I think is worth emphasis, all of the tenants' rights that New York State has are intact here. And for that aspect of this, as well as many others, we didn't want to have additional layers here that were redundant for something that was already protected, either through, tenants' rights with state law or even state building code. And I think when it comes to, the number of bathrooms per bedroom size, number of kitchen facilities, we drew on these numbers from existing stuff. The bedroom size actually was reduced based on guidance that we had for rooming houses. I think that came from some federal language, but we really did look at what is the standard for these things. And if there's protection someplace else, we didn't want to, build into the code something that would maybe become inconsistent with that over time, as long as we referred back to them. The 16-person cap, realistically, most projects are not going to approach that. We wanted to put something there so people weren't worried about the absolute worst case scenario. That's a fairly arbitrary number, to be honest with you, but it just felt reasonable for, an upper limit, but nobody is guaranteed 16, spaces. You have to meet, there's a lot of other restrictions, the health department, lot coverage, setbacks, all of that stuff is still in place. So if you're at, the maximum flow that the health department allows, you're not going to be able to do this. Just like any other development, people are going to have to make choices about how they want to sort of put that puzzle together and still be in line with all of the various restrictions. The size of the property, David, you brought that up. I'll be honest with everybody. I'm pretty aggressive on this. You know, I'm pretty aggressive in that I think that we need affordable housing of all types. I want to encourage these types of developments, but I also want to make sure it's palatable for the board and the public. And so we talked about, you know, smaller acreage, but I think there were some very good points brought up that in commercial areas like Montauk, you're already allowed accessory commercial apartments. And so perhaps in those areas, there's already a way to achieve that. But I remain very, very open to broadening this, but that was something that came up quite a bit. And again, in the number of properties that would be allowed to do this would increase greatly if you reduce that size. So I'm open to it, but one of the primary thoughts there was that you can already do this through accessory commercial apartments. I also wanted to talk about the industrial use. It was addressed, but importantly, the difference between the zoning. You're totally right, Dave, because service commercial in an industrial zone might be a very appropriate, you know, use. This would be an appropriate use for a service commercial place that stores materials but isn't not dangerous stuff. And so I was an advocate for that. But when we looked at the actual industrial uses, I think the planning department brought up some good points that often is not desirable. But the zone, we wanted to allow for this theoretically in a lot of different places, as long as that particular site, you know, was not dangerous and was appropriate. Parking, the number of parking spaces, this was also something we kicked back and forth. And remember, this will go before site plan, and so they're gonna have to demonstrate that they have what they need. What we didn't want to do is create all this extra parking if it wasn't in fact needed. And so to your point, if the business already has a lot of parking spaces, or, you know, in some cases, people don't have their own vehicle. So we wanted to leave that open, but have something in there. I think that particular number is up for debate, but again, we didn't want to put too many rules in place that led for development that didn't make sense in an empty parking lot when, you know, there were very few cars associated. So just want to again thank Ed, Eric, Tina, and Mark for all of your work on this and for the board. And again, reiterate that anybody who thinks that this might be useful to them or anybody else who has thoughts about this use, please give comments. We want to make this better, and it's something I want to move forward with as much information as we can get.
Great, thank you.
What's your timing and next steps?
I think the next steps are to hopefully receive, you know, public comment, to take all the comments that you guys have come up with today, get back with Tina, Mark, Eric, and Ed, and then bring it back. Hopefully, you know, April. You know, that's the soonest.
Yeah, I was going to say, you know,
May. You know,
mid-March, from a month from now, like the third meeting in April.
Sure.
Which might then allow for a public hearing in May.
Yeah. No, I would love that. And again, what makes me able to say that is how hard the town team has worked on this. That's, you know, these things take time, but
yeah. Well, this is a change to the zoning code, so this has got to go to the planning board, correct?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Ed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Ed, you're going to be back. All right. Next up, Eric, stay on, because you're going to be leading the discussion. You forwarded a memo on the ADU hearing that we had on March 5th.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'll pretty much just go through the memo that I sent to the board, and it's basically just a summary of the public hearing and the public comments. So the town board held a public hearing for this proposed local law on Thursday, March 5th. 2 members of the public spoke at that hearing. 1 member of the public was in support of the proposed code changes and noted a specific example where the prohibition on second homeowners being eligible to build an ADU was prohibitive, while the other expressed numerous concerns and was generally in opposition. To summarize, concerns were expressed over the effectiveness of the ADU program, potential negative impacts to neighbors, and of most emphasis that removing the restriction to owner-occupied units will result in LLCs and investment corporations creating ADUs. Basically, what we did was organize these comments to try to condense the issues for the board. So 2 public comments were that the town board should focus more on promoting affordable housing developments as opposed to ADUs, which would result in more housing units quicker, and that most ADUs are in only 2 school districts, East Hampton and Springs. We grouped those two comments together as we have not identified any needed substantive changes to the proposed code resulting from those comments, although those comments should be considered by the town board. We note that the proposed code changes would not impact where ADUs are located and does not affect the cap of 40 per school district or 200 town-wide. We also note that the town is pursuing multiple strategies for affordable housing by providing a wide variety of options to address the affordable housing challenges within the town. It is the goal that this will facilitate greater participation in the available programs. The next public comment was that the ADU program has not been successful enough, primarily as there are too many legal hoops to jump through. We would note that part of the purpose of the local law is to reduce obstacles and code prohibitions that limit the number of specific properties and types of residents, specifically second homeowners, that would otherwise be eligible. As such, this represents an effort, at least in part, to address some of the existing barriers to building ADUs. The next public comment was that 15,000 square foot lots are non-conforming in any residential zoning district and therefore too small to permit ADUs. We would say it's the intent of the proposed code change to widen the applicability of the ADU program, and therefore allowing smaller lots to apply for the program is in this context an appropriate strategy. 15,000 square feet, which is only 5,000 square feet less than what is currently the minimum lot area requirement, should still be adequate land area for situating an ADU in a single family residence. These lots, just like any other, would need to comply with the applicable property setbacks and building and total lot coverage maximums, which help facilitate maintenance of existing or of aesthetic character within the neighborhood. Also, although ADUs are permitted on residential property with existing single-family residences and are permitted in all residential zoning districts, they are also currently allowed through a special permit in all of the commercial zoning districts. Most of all except for CS, which is a uncommon zoning district. And it's noted that CB and NB have minimum lot area requirements of 3,000 and 10,000 square feet respectively. In the instance of a CB zone lot of 15,000 square feet, such a lot would not be non-conforming to minimum lot area, although the single family residence use would be deemed non-conforming on such a property. The addition of an ADU is otherwise allowed with a special permit, similar to an apartment within a commercial structure. The next public comment was that the presence of ADUs in a neighborhood decreases the value of neighboring properties. No information has been provided to the record in support of this. Anecdotally, the planning department observes that the property values in East Hampton as a whole have not decreased since the inception of the ADU program. Regardless, this is already a use within the town code, and there is no reason to believe that any of the subject code changes would result in development that significantly impacts or detracts from the value of adjacent properties. The last public comment, which includes a number of topics, was really the most emphasized one. And that was that removing the requirement that an ADU be an owner's primary legal residence and that they actively occupy it should not be done. Requiring owner-occupied makes the owner or landlord more likely to be able to address potential issues, and it doesn't prohibit someone from just taking a vacation for a few months out of the year. This also opens up the door to ADUs becoming just investment properties, and limitations should be put on LLC zoning lots with ADUs by distinguishing between owner-occupied and income-producing commercial properties, which can be discerned from tax filings. Also, non-owner occupied properties with ADUs may not be eligible for funding opportunities. So that's a number of topics there, but all on sort of the same topic, and that was public comment. And again, with these public comments, this is me summarizing them, so I apologize that I'm not expressing the points that the public expressed verbatim. But I think we got the spirit of the comments. So basically, all of those points, the planning department would note that homes rented through the existing rental registry program are inherently rented without the property owner being physically present, and this program permits non-residents to reside on a residential property. The planning department notes that this proposed change allows homeowners with ADUs the same ability to rent their home as the homeowners who do not have ADUs. We find this an appropriate way to remove a potential obstacle for a homeowner considering building and renting an ADU when they do not plan to use their East Hampton home. The planning department notes that a principal concern of permitting ADUs on properties that are not owner-occupied is the potential for inadequate oversight and/or maintenance. However, this could be remedied by requiring that a property manager be identified when the Office of Housing and Community Development issues a permit. So in other words, identifying someone who is within town or within short distance of the site that can respond to any issues, just as an on-site landlord would. It is stated that for-profit enterprises, such as an investment property that is owned by an LLC, should not be permitted to have an ADU. The planning department notes that such properties are common in East Hampton and that these code changes, as currently drafted, would indeed permit this situation. However, as one of the key purposes of these code changes is to facilitate the construction of more ADUs throughout the town, it would seem that this would be a good way, based on existing market trends, to achieve this goal. Provided adequate safeguards, such as requiring a property manager, are put in place, the planning department does not see this ownership arrangement as inherently problematic. And then really just the last point addressing the public comments, the board may wish to get additional information from the town attorney's office or Office of Housing and Community Development, or both, as to whether or not owner-occupied properties or those which are owned by an LLC are eligible for the Community Housing Fund grants or loans, or the CD Long Island +1 grants or loans. However, the planning department finds that to be a separate issue, as nothing in the proposed code change inherently involves use of the CHF. In other words, you could have the code be more lax and then have programs that offer financial assistance that have additional restrictions, but this code doesn't preclude those additional restrictions from being imposed. So basically, in conclusion, the board should discuss the public comments and determine if any changes need to be made to the draft legislation. At this time, the planning department is not recommending changes, such as removing the provisions to permit second homeowners to be eligible, or the provision to reduce the minimum lot area requirement to 15,000 square feet, which we see as the main elements of these proposed code changes. The planning department defers to the town attorney's office with regard to whether or not any possible changes the board may require would be substantial enough to require the holding of a third public hearing. Remember, we did hold one public hearing and amended the draft changes. Once the board has formed a consensus on the content of the proposed code provisions and provided no further changes or public hearings are required, then the town board should both declare lead agency status, the town board's the only involved agency on this under SECRA, and make a SECRA declaration. Once these steps have been completed, the necessary referral to the Suffolk County Planning Commission will be sent, and their comments will be sent to the town board, at which time it would be time for the town board to vote on the proposed local law. I will say, really, the conversation today is to have a discussion about the public's comments, see if there's any changes that you need, and then the next step would be that the planning department at a upcoming work session would bring in an EAF, an environmental assessment form, an environmental assessment of the project to the town board for the town board to make a secret declaration.
All right. Thank you, Eric. Tom, did you want to lead us off
if I may,
with this legislation?
Yes. So look, I think the most important thing that you stated in many ways in there, Eric, is that this does not change the cap. The town has a 40 per school district cap across the town. So this is not saying we're going to have more ADUs. This is saying, in some senses, to some of the public feedback we got, hey, look, ADUs haven't, necessarily been adopted the way the town hoped they would. So we've done that deeper dive into this. The two of the key pieces we've come back with to kind of increase engagement here is, one, reduce the lot size, because so many lots in many of these school districts are under the existing limits. And two, the primary home ownership piece. Look, it is much of the discussion we have on housing when we have it emphasizes that significant second home ownership, and enabling those properties to have year-round residents on them who can help the town and, provide different services is a critical piece. I do want to mention one other thing, because we did bring this back to the ADU committee to discuss. One kind of inherent discussion that came up there, is, related to the comments. It was the impacts on the school district financially. So we did have the housing department review our existing ADU occupancy, and I think it's 10% of our existing houses, or ADUs, sorry, have a child living So this is not something that we're seeing has a significant impact on the school populations. With that said, look, I'd say some of our school districts are incredibly small classes, and I think the children in those schools could potentially benefit from having more kids in their classes. But that's a decision for the school districts to take. But, in terms of what this would do, I don't see this kind of implementing that change based on the statistics we have. Eric, you did speak to it too, so I'm just going to kind of mention my opinion on it, because I think there has been some discussion on this, is to look, the ADU grant or whatever format that takes exactly being given to people who have second homes. We need housing, people, and we should not be stopping affordable housing being built because we're concerned about giving the money to someone who we think might be too rich to get it. It's like, let's get the housing here because that's the primary need. Thanks.
Okay. Anyone else want to comment?
I'll jump. So I support all of the code in general. I do think that, coming down to 15,000 square foot is justified based on the comments that Tom made. So I'll jump to where I'm having the most difficulty, and that's obviously with LLCs and with the second homeowner rule. I don't think that a property manager is an answer. I don't think it's a guardrail, because it's my understanding, Jake, please let me know if this is true, that if you have an LLC, which is a fractional corporation ownership in New York State, and you have a violation, the property manager doesn't get that violation. The violation has to go to the Secretary of State, and then it's sent to the corporation. So I'm trying to figure out how designating a person as a property manager has any impact on that whatsoever. And I am greatly concerned because of the potential of investment profit in this town that exists, including going to a recent event where we were discussing, in fact, ADUs, we were discussing, the opportunities to have an ADU on your property, which I think is essential. All their aspects of the law, I think, are essential, and another tool. But I do, after we discussed what you can do in a commercial zone, which is a zone that we have in town, and after we discussed what you can do in a residential zone, a person raised their hand and said, well, what's your code for investment properties? And as this becomes, considering how East Hampton is such an attractive place for investment, and that's one of the driving determinators in the lack of affordability. As I said before, nobody's building smaller houses anymore. The houses are maxed out to GFA, to max out what you could potentially have. And with the, as we know, and are just going to begin to collect data on the short-term rental industry that's come into this town, as it has in other areas, makes me very concerned about abuses for a separate structure on properties owned by these types of companies, and releasing it from being a second homeowner. Even I could see a second homeowner whose house is in their name having a value, although there is still the problem of maintenance and oversight on that ADU, although I really don't feel like that's really a very big issue. But I am concerned that right now we don't have enough guardrails in place to allow that. Even looking at, in the future, looking at who we allow as rentals, who we allow to participate in rental registry. There's been questions, and other municipalities have dealt with it, that at least one of the properties that person owns has to be a primary residence within the town, so that we're ensuring that outside investment companies that are looking to come here solely for the purpose of profits do not take any loophole that we leave in the code and exploit that. So those are the only area in this code that I have very deep concerns about.
Thank you, Kate.
Yeah, I'm supportive of this. Tom, thank you for your work on this and the ADU committee. I think that I think ADUs are going to be a piece to the puzzle that we're trying to solve with affordable housing. Like the last discussion, it's not going to be the entire answer. And like the last discussion, I think it's appealing because this is, we're going to talk separately about potentially funding this, but otherwise this is private investment, private people helping us to address, a townwide need. I do think the point about second homeowners and LLC ownership is an important one. I think there are practical guardrails in place, and that I don't think somebody who wants to do like a luxury rental would necessarily pair that with an ADU. But I think it's a valid concern, and I think we should talk about it. Second homeowner, somebody who has a place out here, they spend a significant amount of time, but also might live someplace else, is very different than a purely investment. Somebody who owns an LLC and otherwise has no ties to the community at all. I'm okay with allowing it because I don't see a proliferation of this as a problem. And I think that the main point here is to provide affordable units, and any tenant would need to be income and rent restricted. And so to me, it's getting more units that are rent and income restricted so that we have affordable housing stock is the important goal. And the main structure then becomes less important. However, I do acknowledge the concerns that you don't want to have, a slumlord type of situation where people are just trying to build as much as they possibly can and rent it out. I don't think that's likely, but it's a valid concern. If we do address it in any more detail, I would hope that we would make a distinction between LLCs and second homeowners who might have real ties to the community.
I think one really important thing to mention about that, and I think, David, you brought this up previously, is that more and more homeowners are moving to LLC ownership of their own properties because it's got many, many benefits. And so I think that it's how you differentiate between an LLC and, who and what, I think is very complex.
So I think what that accentuates for me, Tom, is that if it's an LLC and it's your primary residence, no problem, right? Who cares what you decide for estate purposes to do with your home? That type of use, it is your residence. So we know that that's not being just rented out for investments and that's it. So that's with an LLC, even tying it to those in a primary residence is a better guardrail for me than fractional ownership.
I appreciate that. I think more what you're saying, what I'm hearing is actually it's not the LLCs the issue for you. It's the second homeowners.
No, it's the opposite. It's the structure of LLCs because that is the model. There's no variation from that for investment companies. So to put it again on the town. So whenever we create these laws now, we're putting it on, it has to be registered with this department. It has to do this department. So we're now putting more public funding into the need to regulate. So I just am with what we see happening in short-term rentals, et cetera, investing rentals versus an association with the community. It's my second home. That's great. I think second home ownership is fantastic, actually, for our town. I don't think it's an impediment, but I think strictly my biggest concern is that we're opening up a loophole for investors to come into the town and to increase their investment opportunities. When you look through all of the data for what's now becoming an investment industry or short-term rental industries, all these industries, it is how to maximize your profits over being part of a community. And I just don't want to open that door.
Yeah, I mean, I understand what you're saying.
That's my concern.
Yeah, no, I think that second home ownership comes under that bracket too, because look, you don't own a second home because you live there. You own it because it's typically a good investment. I mean, people's real estate portfolio is the primary portion of their wealth. And so the second home ownership piece is no different to the LLC. I think if a resident in the town chooses to own their home under an LLC and wants to build an ADU, like there's probably a net win for you. That's an okay situation. But it's, I think the concept of, look, someone's coming in, they're just speculating on property and they're going to build an ADU, and will that ADU be properly used the way ADUs are meant to be used? That's the concern. I get that. I think as we deliver affordable housing, the more we deliver, the more we do have to regulate. And that's the case for other existing properties, be that Windmill or wherever. Like, that's just something we have to accept as we build affordable housing.
Yeah, I just would like to have a guardrail in place before we're opening the loopholes. And I just feel that if you have if your property's in an LLC ownership, if it's your primary residence, if you can prove that your primary residence is town of East Hampton, build an ADU. I think the concern of what I'm looking to limit before it happens, which is always easier than if, once we have it happening here, to try to pull back things, in my experience, is just to be very careful. And I do have concerns about exploitation on that level. And I don't think we are properly addressing them yet. And again, just to ensure that it doesn't happen is more important than trying to fix it after it does happen. Then now we're back in court. That's just my feelings and my concerns.
Can I ask, so 'cause I don't recall the numbers, when you did the short-term rental presentation, and there were two markets here in East Hampton, right? Montauk was one market and the rest of East Hampton. I mean, is it fair to say that there's more short-term rental opportunities in, say, Montauk and Amagansett, Napeak, than there are in other, could you break it down that far?
I don't think they broke it down that far. It's one submarket is East Hampton, but the numbers, I mean, the East Hampton submarket, you're looking about 1,800 rentals, short-term rentals. The Montauk market less. So I don't know. Hopefully, this is getting ahead of my liaison report, but going out for RFP on software that will be able to monitor rental registry for us. That RFP is closed. We have the reviewing committee formed, and we're going to be looking to recommend a vendor for that for us, which is how other municipalities really successfully regulate their rental programs. That it will inform us by hamlet and by ownership. If somebody owns 17 houses in a neighborhood, one LLC or one person will know that. So these are data that's yet to come to us.
Okay. David, did you have comments you wanted to make?
I do. Tom, thank you. I do support the decrease in lot area for the ADUs on there then too. I know we initially did that 8 years ago when it was detached ADUs, and it didn't really lead to a drive, an overwhelmingness to our departments. I do agree that a lot of this is going to come down to the Office of Community Housing Development. It's going to be a lot of making sure that these lists and all of our safeguards are guarded and reviewed every year, and that's going to be policy, and I have faith in that department. So overall, I am very comfortable moving this forward to a vote. When it comes to LLCs on there, Kate, I completely get where you're at and where some LLC ownerships can be abused. I also see where it is estate planning. That's my family. My parents' house here, where they consider this is their home, is actually an LLC, but they're a primary residence someplace else. So there's ways in which LLCs are done for family estate planning, for betterment and safeguards of taxes, but at the same time are not being abused. I might be a minority now to it, but again, I'm going to try to be optimistic that I'm the majority. So overall, when we start looking at that there are some individuals in some situations in which LLCs are used for the benefit of family without a detriment to the community. But I completely understand, I'm not naive to it, that there's individuals and situations that are taking advantage of our community. I look forward to the next steps on that with you on there, but there are situations like that. Overall, Tom, thank you for bringing this forward. I look forward to the vote.
Yeah, so I'm comfortable with reducing to 15,000 square feet. And I'm also supportive of allowing second homeowners to build ADUs. Because for me, we do have that cap in place of 40 per school district. And that is, for me, the guardrail. But also to the point Ian brought up, I was thinking the same thing. If I've, invested in a $5 million house because I'm going to be operating it, unfortunately, as a short-term rental, I don't know if I'm going to folks are going to be putting ADUs on that property because it's high, it was a costly investment, and there's a certain look and feel and vibe that they're going for when they're marketing these short-term rentals, and I'm not sure that they want someone would be a teacher living on the property that they're spending $1,500 a night renting a room. So I'm less concerned with that. We also have the ability, if we see this being taken advantage of, that we can amend the law and make that change. So I'm comfortable moving forward and asking at the next board meeting, if have a resolution on to declare lead agency, and then ask the planning department to conduct a secret analysis.
Yeah, just to put a finer point on, I agree, I'm supportive of the law as drafted. I just wanted to highlight, second homeownership versus LLC. I agree with what Tom and Dave have said, that it's not so cut and dry. I also think, Kate, you're doing work on the short-term rentals, which is great, because I think realistically, some of the short-term rental properties we're concerned about are not abiding by the 2 short-term rentals per year as it is. And so
It's 2 per 6 months.
So it's 2 for 6 months, I'm sorry. So if those properties are acting within the confines of the code, that it becomes less of a concern. Again, I acknowledge the problems. I also just want to say that if people are investing and the way they're investing in our town leads to more affordable housing, I welcome that. I think we have to balance that with quality of life for sure. But I just, any investment in affordable housing that leads to more affordable housing units in East Hampton, I think is largely positive, as long as we can balance the quality of life. And I also think that, as it's been pointed out, enforcement and town staff may have to increase if we have more affordable housing units, but that's money very well spent by our municipality, because this is such a major issue that we want to address.
As long as we build more affordable housing for them.
Yep.
Okay, so we're going to wrap up this and move on to our next topic, which is the ADU construction loan recommendation, and we welcome Mark Morgan Perez. Hi, Mark.
Hello. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to present this program. I think you're all pretty familiar with what the proposal is.
Could you just pull the mic down so that we're...
Sure. Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
So, as you know, the town already has the state +1 ADU construction assistance program in place. This is meant to complement that, as that program round has wound up. So this could be an ongoing initiative to help increase ADU production. The proposal is interest-free repayable loans of $100,000 each. The idea is that the Community Housing Fund would have an initial allocation for this year of $1 million, so that would be 10. They're available to residential property owners whose properties meet town code. They're secured by a lien in favor of the town of East Hampton Community Housing Fund. Tenants have to live or work or lived in the town of East Hampton for the past 5 years. There are income limits on the tenants. There are also rent limits in place. Leases have to be year-round, and the ADU must be rented in compliance with the town's rental program for a minimum of 10 years. And again, an annual rental permit has to be handled each year by the Office of Housing and Community Development. So those are the basics of the program. It's pretty straightforward, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Ian, you want to?
Yeah, I just thank you, Mark, for this. This is something we've discussed a couple of times, and thank you, Chad. I saw Andrew Garvey here earlier. I think he had to leave, but Community Housing Advisory Board has weighed in and is supportive of this. We intentionally have waited on this because we wanted to see if there were changes to ADU laws generally, that we timed the release of funding. Tom, that was a point you made when we talked about this a while back. I think it was very good. We want to make sure that people who might take advantage of this on smaller lots who need the funding have it available as well. I just want to make, so I'm not going to go into too many details. I'm supportive of this as it's written. The only clarification I want to make in public comment, we spoke about the 10-year rule. Just to be clear, nobody's going to be allowed to use an ADU, and rent it as a luxury apartment after those 10 years. We might want to clarify this a little bit, and anybody who gets funding is going to have a lengthy contract that tells them what they're allowed to do. These are just sort of guidelines, but I understand where that confusion comes from. The point is, we want people to know that they're investing, if they're taking town money, we expect that to be an ADU with affordable standards for a period of time, but it could never fall out of the general ADU guidelines. Just like I was saying before, this is a use-related thing. So if you, I think the one caveat there is our town code doesn't currently require income restrictions on ADUs generally. And so perhaps that would actually drop after the 10 years, but the rent restriction would stay in place because all of our ADUs are rent restricted. We probably do have to get an attorney's opinion to make sure that community housing funds allow for that. If the affordability, the income restriction is okay to go away after a period of time. But in any case, it was never intended for a property to then just have 2 units they can do whatever they want with after those 10 years. So I think we probably want to clarify that.
Who wants to go next?
Well, that was one of my main things also on there then too. It's the same thing we talked about. It's within the ADU code right now. If it's not used for ADU and you actually put in here, I believe 6 months on there, the structure's got to revert back to an accessory structure, or be abandoned was the word earlier used, or removed on there. And so that's something just in the clarity of the policy on here. I think we just need to make sure, again, saying eyes wide open to this on there, that the structure can't be habitable. It has to work within what current zoning is for you if you're not using it anymore.
Yeah, I think to clarify that a little bit, if someone's doing a conversion of an existing structure internally and using some of this funding to put in something, like all they had to do is take out what they've put in. If it's a detached ADU, and this has been reviewed with the committee and you've used this, if you're not going to have an ADU, it's going to have to go away. Or if it's an attachment or an extension of an existing property, same thing. Like, look, that law is very clear. Like, the purpose behind the loan and the code change is for these to be affordable accessory dwelling units.
Correct. If not, they become accessory dwelling units. Sorry, accessory structures, and they have to go to the zoning that's underlying. Sure. But overall, yes, thank you. I support it. $100,000. If it covers it all, it really depends on which ones. But at least it's a really big help, and I think it actually would be a real big, a lot of it assistance to individuals out there that like to do this type of program or join the program on there. And so it's another way that the administration is moving that way, and are all hands on housing initiatives.
I agree. I'm very, as noted earlier, very supportive of this. I think, look, if we can start to incentivize this and get these units built, and this pushes towards that, I know that there's demand out there too, Mark. I mean, we had a lot of people take up loans from the CD+1 organization as that rolled out. We met our quota, right? We got everything we could from that program. So we know the need is there. So yeah, I'm supportive of this moving forward.
I'm supportive, except for the idea that there's no cap on your income. You're eligible for this loan no matter what you make a year. We have people in this town that make quite a bit of money a year, and it's hard for me to justify in my head they would be receiving the funds versus somebody that doesn't make anywhere near $10 million a year being denied funding because there isn't enough in there to cover them. I think there has to be some kind of cap, or at least a preference for people who, make a certain amount of money and are trying to help out or need the ADU for themselves, right? So that I could live in the ADU and my son's family could live in the house, where these are all the other associated uses with the accessory dwelling units, or vice versa. And that funding not being available to me because somebody that makes unending amount of money is decided to use that public funding when it would be easy for them to do it. So the idea of no income cap is a problem for me, or at least a preference for people, up to a certain income to have these loans. Is the CD1 program has no income?
No, it does have an income cap. So the state program has a 130% AMI cap. On the applicant income.
Yeah, I don't think it should be that low here, but I do think just no cap is an issue for me.
Yeah, so I agree with Kate, and I was on the board when the water quality, CPF water quality referendum passed, and when we were doing initially the septic incentive, first we started as rebates and then we moved to grants. We had a cap. So beginning when that program started in 2016, 2017 through December 2019, we had income-based restrictions, and we used the eligibility for the basic New York State tax relief, the STAR program, and so you had to make less than $500,000 a year household annual income, and I think that that's where I'm comfortable. I don't think somebody who's, a corporate attorney that's making, $2.5 million should be able to, if we've only going to have 10 available, I think that there has to be a household income restriction on the money. I also, listening to Mr. Buda earlier in public comment, I also would be supportive of having it only go to full-time residents. Like, this is a program that I've heard from a number of people that have been waiting for us to announce this program to build an ADU because they need assistance on the costs associated with it. They love their kids, but we're really happy to see them move into the ADU in the backyard. So I think for me, I would want to see the very minimum a income restriction, but I would like to see it only be available to full-time residents and give it a year to see if we're finding that, we've only given out 2 because of the way we've constructed it, then we can loosen the valve and change the requirements.
That makes sense. I think the idea of having an income cap aligns with best practices and affordable housing policy to make sure that we're serving the community that needs help and not assisting people who don't need it.
Yeah, assistance is for those who need it.
So just rolling through that. So yes, the water quality technical money was $500,000. In that situation, one of the justifications for us removing the income cap is because where the priority water areas are areas more in the waterfront or the travel time. And those houses that are in the travel time areas are typically, a lot of them are owned by individuals of high net worth, we wanted to get to those locations. Still, it was an incentivization program such as this also. So I could see, I could see a cap in income. And I even love the year round. I think $500,000 is a light cap. I think there's families out here that are still working hard that their two sources of income might be even over 500,000. So I think I would, if I was going to go forward, I would like that number to be increased potentially. And again, we're discussing this. And for year round to have priority on that, I could see something to that also, as long as it's legally allowed. Thank you for bringing that forward. These are just discussions here.
Yeah, the $500,000 is tight now in today's world. I don't know if that would eliminate too many people that need it, but I just can't leave it open to anyone's income whatsoever, knowing the types of incomes that are out here, and this is really basically public funding. I could also go along with since there's a limited amount, we're offering it to year-round folks.
I think I should to address why I'm okay with it, is that, look, for me, the goal here is not whether someone rich or poor is getting the benefit of the grant, because they're all taxpayers at the end. It's, are we delivering affordable housing? And I think, look, yes, the person with the higher income, we might feel is less worthy of getting that grant, but they also potentially have the resources to actually build the ADU quickly and efficiently and have land. And you'll have ADUs in relatively nice locations because they're built on bigger lots where incomes, are potentially larger. So I think it's, I just think there's a danger there of trying to use the ADU grant itself for something that we're not really intending with, saying it's like one group might be richer than the other. The goal here is really, let's build the ADUs.
How many came out of the +1 ADU program? Do you know?
15.
15, and for
might be a 16.
In that program, if you had a household size of 2 people, you had to make your maximum annual income was $124,960. So when you think about, that, I mean, this was a tremendous program. I would like to see our program to be for the next tier of income, or, couple of tiers of income.
Sure.
And I don't know, I mean, back in 2017, the STAR, eligibility cutoff was $500,000. I don't know if that number has changed in 2026, 9 years.
I'm sorry, the eligibility.
STAR, we used the STAR.
Oh, okay.
As the, for how we got to what the household annual income should be.
I mean, I can look into different metrics and see what other municipalities do to see if we can arrive at something that works specifically for our needs.
So it sounds like we're a little bit split on this. In terms of the income restriction, I mean, I agree with Tom that the main point is the construction of an affordable unit. And, however we get there, that is sort of the victory. But I understand what everybody else is saying, that, we don't want to give money to somebody who might construct it otherwise. We want more ADUs, right? And so we don't want very wealthy people who might be doing it one way or the other to take away from somebody who is really dependent on the funding. I don't think that's going to be the case, so I would be okay with leaving the income restriction out. But frankly, this has been discussed by CHAB, but it was always at a fairly low income restriction. And so this idea of making it some income restriction, but much higher, is something I could get behind, as long as we all agree that we would make a change quickly if it's not being used. Because I would feel bad if 10 of these went out right away and then people who need the money don't get that. And looking at how CDLI went, that got filled fairly quickly. Yeah, it's a valid concern. I've softened on that, and we have not talked about the full-time resident restriction. I guess I feel the same. I'm open to that as long as we are committed to being nimble and flexible and changing that if this is not taken advantage of. Again, the main point here is that ADUs get constructed, and so that there's an affordable unit for people to take advantage of. One other thing I want to say, though, that I think would be a natural barrier to people using this funding who really didn't need it, is if you use the funding, your ADU is then rent restricted, which all of our ADUs always are, but also income restricted. And so there is this extra level that people, they're not able then to give it to a very wealthy family member or whatever. And so I think there's a natural appeal if somebody has an endless amount of money that they would want to build it with their own money because it's less restrictive. However, I'm open to sort of putting extra guardrails in place as long as we change quickly if it's not used.
Yeah, I listen. One way I look at this is that, relatively speaking, the cost to the town of providing one unit of affordable housing here is $100,000. There's no other housing out there that we can offer at that price point from a town's perspective. Like, that's really the be all and the end all of that to me. Like, when we look at Cantwell Court, where we're working exceptionally hard to price engineer the opportunities we're going to give on town-owned land down there for homeownership. Okay, admittedly, it's a home. Even when we work with our excellent partners out there, the cost of the land itself is not insignificant. So irrespective of the homeowner's income, the more units we deliver at $100,000 from CHF, the better we're doing with affordable housing relative to any other housing opportunity.
I agree with that, but if you can spend $1 million on landscaping, I think that you can afford to build that ADU, and with the limited amount of loans available, I think in order to keep it affordable, you want to give that loan to people who need it to build affordable housing rather than just open it up to anybody to use it. The people who need the loan, to me, increases the affordability of it all rather than anyone who could literally spend $1 million landscaping, which we see. So that for me, it's trying to make it the group that will receive it are also in need of help to build affordable housing. And that's the group I'd like to see the funding go to primarily.
So Mark and Ian, what do you need to move this forward?
Well, I think what we need is I think we should take a poll of the board to see who wants a full-time resident restriction. Sounds like Kathy and Kate do. I don't know.
I'm fine with that too.
Okay, so we will add that, and then I think and then the income restriction. Tom, you're opposed. Anybody else? Kathy and Kate, I know you're in favor.
Yeah.
What's the number?
Well, Mark's got to do some research.
You're in favor at a higher number, David?
Yes.
Okay, so I will work with Mark on adding those two things. And remember, these are guidelines. There's also going to be a contract with anybody who gets this money where we're going to have a lot more teeth and enforcement in there. But we will clarify those two things. And I also want to address the 10-year thing and what happens after those 10 years. Never is it going to be just a free-for-all, but is it still income restricted, or how that works?
I'll also promise you, and I'm extremely nimble.
Good.
If we see 6 months or to a year to bring this back, because we've done water quality, and honestly, we've done this almost in every discussion we've done today. There's been a change that we've done from something in the last couple of years. And if we're not nimble, we're going to lose our community. And that's why we're having this complete discussion on affordable housing today.
Agreed. All right. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
All right. We're up to real property tax exemption for ADUs. So Ed Reale is going to lead that discussion. And Ian, you're the liaison to this, right? Because this.
Yep. Yeah, so I mean, Ed Reale worked on this. This was another, we were presented by Jeannie Nielsen a bunch of additional tax exemptions that were passed by the state. This was, the most important of those, I think, or the most obviously, or one that we've been talking about for a while. Ed will describe the details there, but something I think we want to take advantage of.
Great, thanks.
Hello again. So the state legislature passed real property tax law 421P, which created or allowed for a limited property tax exemption for newly created accessory dwelling units. So because the language in the statute says one or more residential units, it's my view that this will also apply to the recently passed affordable multiple residence in certain circumstances as well. So it might apply to that as well, but clearly applies to any new ADUs. The exemption is limited in amount and it's limited in time. The exemption would apply to the increased assessed value of the property attributable to just the ADU up to $200,000 in increased assessed value. So if someone has a home, they build an ADU, if the assessor determines that it's a $300,000 improvement, they will only get the benefit of the $200,000 exemption. But up to $200,000 exemption, it is part of this exemption. They have to spend at least $3,000 making it. So if they created, let's say, converted a garage or did something, or converted already habitable space to an ADU, they have to spend at least $3,000. That's not hard to do out here. So as to the time limits, it's a little bit of a complex formula, but the exemption is for 10 years. The first 5 years, it's 100% of whatever the increase would be. So you do not pay more tax on the ADU up to $200,000 for the first 5 years. For years 6, 7, and 8, there's a 25% decrease in that amount that's left. And then in the last years 9 and 10, it goes down by 10%. And then year 11, you have no exemption left. So it's a little bit of an odd formula. It's a lot of work for the assessor to keep track of this, but that's how the state proposes it be done. The state law allows the town board to vary that percentage. All those percentages, 100%, 25%, 10%. You can change those. It doesn't have to be what the state law says. The state law allows the town board to vary that. So that's a question for the board if you want to go with the state's basic plan, or if you want to vary that. This does not reduce tax revenue. It's important for the public to know this does not reduce tax revenue. It just defers future increases. So if someone builds an ADU, at some point they're going to have to pay tax on it, starting in 5 years, some tax and going up from there. Unlike, I know you talked about a whole bunch of tax deductions with Jeannie Nielsen a couple weeks ago. The timing on this is important. It won't be considered, the person won't get their deduction included because we've already missed the closing of the assessment rolls for this year. So it won't make it in until next year. But there's also a timing factor aside from that, in that this law provides that someone applying for this, someone building a new ADU, cannot get the benefit of this unless they commence construction after the law is passed. So on those other exemptions, you had a lot of time to decide what to do. And if you wanted to pass this law, the sooner the better, because someone who wants to do this now or wants to do this in the coming months needs to have this passed in order to get the advantage of the deduction. It says commences. I'm not sure how you want to interpret that. It could be issuance of a building permit or actual shovel in the ground. But it said you can't get it unless it's commenced after this law is passed. So even though it's not going to be on this year's tax rolls, someone who builds it this year would need this to be passed in order to take advantage of it in the future. I think that's just a key distinction to keep in mind. So to qualify for the exemption, a homeowner would have to begin construction after the law is passed, spend at least $3,000, and create at least one additional dwelling unit or more if you have an affordable multiple residence construction. Again, like some of those other tax laws you talked about last week, the state set this up so the town board can pass an exemption as to town taxes. The county would have to pass one as to county taxes. School district has to pass one as to school district taxes, and you have 6 or 7 school districts to deal with. So it's again limited in that sense, and you need to coordinate with the other entities as far as that goes, or not. But it's only limited to town taxes that you have control over. So to get the complete exemption, the county would have to pass it, and the school district within which the property is located, in order to get that 100% deduction. So, and the process for doing this is pass the local law, file it with New York State. So that's simply it. So the 2 questions for the board is A, whether you want to enact something like this, and B, if you do, at what percentage rates. And that's.
Ed, is there also an option? I'm not sure whether it's comes into effect after 2 or 5 years, like the time which we can abate the taxes for. The period?
No, it's only percentage. The law says only percentage. You can vary the percentage.
So the point at which the property be reassessed, we don't have any say over that time. So I understand it can be like after 5 years, the improvements get reassessed, but is that window has no say from the town board?
I'm not sure what your question is exactly.
So say I build an ADU. And I spend $100,000 doing it, for the first 5 years, I'm not assessed for those improvements on my property. The question I have is that 5 years a fixed number from the state, or could the town say, we're going to reassess you after 2 years?
No, what the state law says is you can vary the percentage, not the time frame.
Okay.
So, and really, if you're improving your property, you should be, that once I believe you get your C of O, that kicks in for the assessor to reassess.
Yeah, but this law will give us the opportunity to waive that for a period of time.
No, well, no, it gets reassessed. You're just not paying
Right, okay.
the difference.
Correct. The problem is the assessor does have to reassess it to determine whether it's 200 or 300 or whatever.
And that happens at issuance of a CO.
But generally, that's what triggers the assessor to go and look at it. One other thing on the timing that I neglected to mention, the state, unlike some of those new laws that were just passed a couple of weeks ago, the state has already issued what's called an exemption code for the assessor, so they can plug it in, and the forms have already been produced by the state tax department. So this is kind of ready to roll from the state's perspective, unlike, again, the ones that were passed in December.
Got it.
Yeah, I just, if you don't mind, I'm very supportive of this. I think we've talked a lot today about encouraging affordable housing generally and about encouraging ADUs. And this is a question I've received from a number of people over the last couple of years is, what about the tax implication? Is that a disincentive? So I'm certainly even in favor of this, and I would want to waive the maximum amount of assessment for the period of time that we can, just to encourage construction of ADUs. I think that that's a public benefit. And to Ed's point, that's not going to reduce the overall tax income. It's just how it's distributed. I also think it's important to recognize the work that the assessors are going to have to do here. It would have been a real scramble to try to get this in place before this tax season, and so people won't be able to take advantage of it. But to Ed's point, I'm in favor of getting a law on the books soon that won't affect the assessors until before next tax roll, but will allow people who are building ADUs to benefit from the legislation that I would like them to. It also will allow us time. I think there's a way for us to pass this law to commit to doing it as a town, but also coordinate with the county, with the school districts, the fire departments, the villages, all the other people, so that we get our ducks in a row, or they have the opportunity to, so the assessors can deal with it all at once. So it's a little bit complicated with the timing, but I'm in favor of getting something on the books for us soon so people can use, take advantage of it. And at the same time, simultaneously I'll help coordinate with the other municipalities or organizations so that the assessors have an easier time and know who's opted in by the time they are working on next year's tax rolls.
Then we have to choose a percentage.
Yeah, I would like to go to the maximum percentage possible.
Which is 25.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Knowing that typically many times the school tax of our districts is the largest tax of any of our tax.
Yeah, so it's 70% of your tax bill is typically your school taxes. 30% is town.
Yeah.
In many of the districts. And the rest is town, county, I believe fire districts, library.
Lighting districts, but yes,
Yeah,
okay.
lighting
Still, either way.
I support.
So I'm supportive. I'm going out of order. I usually go last, but I'm confused about what you're saying about the 25% decrease. Are you suggesting we not follow what the state has, how the state has broken it down? 1 to 5 years is 100% decrease, 6, 7, and 8 is 25%, 9, 10 years is 10%, and then from 11 on, you get no exemption.
Yeah, so Ed, to clarify, you said we could change the percentages. Could we do 100% for the full 10 years, or is that, we can't go beyond 10 years?
Interesting question. The state law says reduce the percent of the exemption. Oh, reduce.
So, okay.
You can't make it 100.
So what's listed as the maximum allowable. We can't go give a greater discount, but
Right.
So I'm in favor of what's laid out by the state.
Okay. Now I'm clear.
And let me just go back to the other side. In case of abandonment, third time we used it here, then they have to coordinate with the assessor's office. Is that correct?
Yes.
Or does the property even get reappraised? Because then instead of going from an ADU, it just goes to an accessory structure.
Yeah, they would presumably have to take some sort of building permit out to change the ADU to a conforming use if they weren't using it as ADU anymore. But it's a good point that leads to coordination. Any ADUs in town have to have an ADU permit from the Office of Housing. We are going to need to make sure that we coordinate with the attorney's office, the assessors, so whenever anybody realizes of a change, and that often might be the housing department, that everybody knows.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Eyes wide open.
Yep.
Okay. David and Tom?
I'm supportive.
I am too. We're incentivizing the need for affordable housing, and this is one of those quivers that we have to do so. But on the backside of it, the tax implications, which we've already seen in the past and other grant fundings, didn't work out as well. It's something I'm happy to be able to determine right up front.
I think it's commiserate too with the amount of services that would be additional for a property for 1 or 2 people extra to live there, 3 people to live there. I think that you're already getting on the rest of your property, you're still going to have the 100%. I think that it makes sense because the use of services does not increase 100% just because you're putting the small unit on your property.
Right, and it's also, you don't want to have, somebody has gone through the trouble and has built an ADU, they're charging up to 130%. And then a portion of that, you would think that rent is paying down, the expense of building the ADU, and then they're going to get socked with, additional taxes. So I'm very comfortable with it. So this is something we can get notice for public hearing.
Thank you, Ed.
Okay, thank you.
Ed. All right, we're closing in on it. Brittany Toledano, our deputy town attorney, is here to talk about rent-restricted employer-sponsored housing. Welcome, Brittany.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Are we doing 255, 120 first?
We're gonna do that last.
Okay.
We're gonna.
Okay, so the rent-restricted employer-sponsored housing is in recognition of a need for additional housing options like we've discussed. This is one possible option we can take.
Brittany, can you just pull the microphone
sure.
down a little bit? Thanks.
Such housing would be accomplished by special permit and would contain many of the same provisions of the traditional affordable housing development as required by the town code. However, this rent-restricted employer-sponsored housing would only be permitted in parcels located within both an affordable housing overlay and a limited business overlay district. The units created would be used for the use of and available to moderate income families as defined by the chapter. All units would remain subject to rent limits and occupancy would be offered for employees of a sponsoring employer. So I don't know if you want me to go through each section, but I can sum it up.
That'd be great.
The first section is the definition section, which would require rent-restricted employer-sponsored housing to have a maximum monthly rental that would not exceed the 130% of the FMR. Rents would be restricted further pursuant to recorded covenants. Units would be managed and monitored by third-party property management companies approved by the town's Office of Housing and Community Development. And the units would not constitute general multifamily residential housing or affordable housing units as otherwise defined in the code. Next, you'll see in 255, 550, the special permit standards. You'll see the site considerations. Most of these were taken to be identical to the affordable housing considerations that we have in the code. So the site size, the dimensional area and coverage requirements, density restrictions, the option for increased density. Those are all the same as they are as for affordable housing developments. The difference here is, like I said before, the entire proposed site would need to be located in both an AHO and an LBO. And that could not be waived by the planning board. The only way that could be changed is a code amendment. And I'll just say the reason we're looking to limit it at this point is we're going to designate it to overlay districts that are reasonably related to ensuring that there's compatibility with the existing land use patterns and proximity to employment centers, services, transportations. And we want to roll it out kind of slowly, so that made the most sense. Services and design, which are the next two sections, are also the same as affordable housing developments. The legal requirements are the same. You'll see that we have inserted here affordability and tenant protections. This is number 4. This is different from affordable housing, traditional affordable housing. These units would remain subject to rent limits set forth in the definition. They would be memorialized in a recorded affordability covenant that will run with the land. All dwelling units and lots created shall be available to moderate income families. The occupancy would be offered to employees of sponsoring employers. There would be a grace period for tenants should they lose their employment. That grace period would be the longer of 6 months or until the end of the tenant's current term. There's the option that the sponsoring employer, in consultation with the third-party management company, could authorize continued tenancy beyond those points. And notwithstanding anything within this law, tenants would have all the same rights and protections consistent with New York state law. This local law would also give authority to the Office of Housing and Community Development to promulgate additional rules and regulations to carry out this section and the intent of this section. A copy of those rules and regulations would be kept on file at the clerk's office and published on the town's website. And the way they could be amended or repealed is by resolution of the town board. For management, this was an important one. We would require third-party management companies. Each management company would need to be approved by the Office of Housing and Community Development. That could be pursuant to a list that's maintained by the Office of Housing and Community Development, or it could be proposed to the Office of Housing and Community Development. They could vet the entity and determine whether they are an appropriate third-party property management company. And then Section 7 is legal. This is the same requirements that are found in traditional affordable housing developments. The planning board would have the opportunity to impose conditions that would assure that these units remain affordable in perpetuity. A difference here from the Affordable Housing Code is condos would be permitted, but they would need to propose an operating plan, and the third-party management company would need to be a separate and distinct entity from the HOA or condo board, whatever is applicable. And everything else has been lifted pretty much from the Affordable Housing Code.
Who wants to start us off?
I will. Thank you, Brittany, for this. I'm definitely supportive of this legislation. I think that, again, today's meeting is all about, the need for affordable housing. And I do think that this legislation would result in affordable units and that they would be rent restricted. And so the people living there are the people that we need to have housing, that we have a lack of housing. I think the difference is that this is employer funded. So that's a different model from our traditional affordable housing developments, and it's worthy of a distinction there. The most important, I think, part of this legislation to me, obviously the rent restriction so that the units are affordable to the people living there, but then the management to make sure that it's a cohesive development that doesn't have, conflict within itself. So I support it for sure. I think that we do need traditional affordable housing developments too, and so that's another reason for us to differentiate this from that, because it's, I think, a very worthwhile endeavor. The idea of construction units that are going to be rent restricted with no public money. Tom referred to the $100,000 for ADU assistance and what a value that is based on what things cost. This is potentially zero investment, but we need to make sure that the developments function and are compatible with surrounding areas. And I think, to me, it's the third-party management that's so important there. So I think this, we probably need to refine this a little bit, but I'm very, very supportive of the concept. And Brittany, thanks I know a lot of work went in. Not only Brittany, I know Tina Lagaran and Mark Morgan Perez, I believe Eric Chance was involved. A lot of deliberation went into this. So thank you.
Yeah, I'll jump next. I support this. I think it is very important to distinguish this and to allow a concept that is not considered affordable housing under our code to exist. I think that it's very important, the topics that Ian talked about and having third-party management. Again, this is putting the onus of compliance on the property owner and not on the town, which I think is very important. And I also think restricting it to the limited business overlay district also is crucial for this law, as I think you well stated, that's where employment opportunities are. The LBOs are usually at the shoulder of commercial districts, so I think that this mitigates traffic implications, et cetera. So I support it as written.
What are the next steps for this?
When we're satisfied with a draft, it would have to go to public hearing. It would have to go to the planning board. It would have to go to.
Planning board first, then public hearing? Yes.
Yes, but if substantive changes were made after the public hearing, it would go back to the planning board.
Okay.
And it would have to go to the Sub-County Planning Commission.
Okay. Yeah, look, I'm supportive of this moving forward, certainly to public hearing. I mean, I think, Kate, you called out one of my key things is, the zoning where this can happen. And, look, we saw this last time, whenever 60 units is a possibility somewhere, we have to be very clear with, understanding what impacts that implies to neighborhoods surrounding. And, I think this zoning is very tight.
in terms of where these kind of things can be done. And it ties back to the long-term planning that the town has been involved with. So I think this is appropriate. I think, having that public hearing is critical, and I look forward to seeing this move forward.
Thank you, Tom. So I'm supportive as well, as my colleagues are, to move forward with this. Ian, you made a comment, though, that you think it still needs tweaking. There's things in here that you want to see.
No, not necessarily. There's nothing in particular.
Okay.
So no, I'm open to.
So are we comfortable sending it to the planning board at this point for their comment?
Yes.
I'm supportive of that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then the next step would be to go to the planning board for comment. Great. And we're closing in on it. The last topic today, code amendment to chapter 255-1-20.
Okay, so you have before you 255-120, the definition for affordable housing unit. 255-120 of the town code sets forth the definition and provides that the following limits shall apply, including maximum rental limits and maximum initial sales price limits. You'll see in section A, there's the maximum initial sales price, and B is the maximum rental limits. In prior affordable housing developments sponsored and approved by the town, units were either created and conveyed at affordable rates to income qualified purchasers, or they were created and operated as regulated affordable rental units from the inception. The town has consistently applied the maximum initial sales price limitation when individually owned affordable units were created for sale. And I'll also add that when there is a list of limits and it says the following limits shall apply, when there's no conjunction in between the two in legal and technical writing, you have to assume that that's an and that they are cumulative. Recent review of the town's affordable housing code provisions have determined that the current phrasing, which I just stated, could be confusing to applicants because the lack of conjunction in between the two factors. So this amendment is being proposed to clarify and confirm the original legislative intent of Chapter 255, and that intent is that affordability protections attach at the point of creation of an affordable housing unit. So it would essentially just be adding the and between A1 and A2, and then so that there's no confusion, a sentence after that, which reads, where both an initial conveyance of title and the regulated rental of the same dwelling unit are components of the creation and operation of an affordable housing unit, compliance with both the maximum initial sales price limitation and the maximum rental limitations shall be required. And that's just to clear up any potential ambiguity in the code and to memorialize the original intent of the code.
I support. I think it's important to help folks with confusion anywhere that we can. So, and that's why I support this.
Same steps?
Yes. Has to go to planning board. It has to go to Suffolk County Planning Commission as well for, I guess we could.
It's on high, limited. We would have to check where they're located. Are they located on a state highway?
Tina or Eric may have that information offhand.
Hi, Tina.
Hi, board members. I'm pretty sure it does as a change to the code, but since it's just a clarification, I'll double check, but I'm pretty sure they typically do have to go.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, my only comment, and I'm generally supportive of this, my only concern is to make sure that that in any scenario with sort of traditional affordable housing that we know of, that the initial sales price, how that's interpreted. I don't know that industry super well, but it's conceivable to me that the town would hire a developer to come develop a project, because that's an involved process, but then would take ownership and purchase that. And just based on the cost of development, I want to make sure that anything we do here would not get in the way of that as a possibility of a developer building affordable housing, but selling it to the town or the housing authority as a completed project.
Yeah, I mean, well, it doesn't matter what they do to the housing authority. They don't fall under this code. This is only So I don't think it would be.
Well, I think they would if and again, I don't know that this would happen.
I mean, they're typically the housing department, the new model is that they are the ones that are the developers, right? They're the ones that are signing the contract with the developer or, and developing it, and whether they're using community housing fund money and borrowing from a bank, or they're using, tax credits because they're going for a lower income project. Is Mark still here? Or he left? Mark, I don't know if you want to weigh in on what Ian is addressing.
I'm sorry, can you state the question again?
Well, my only concern is the possibility, I think that the scenario you just laid out, Kathy, is the way that it's usually worked. The housing authority sort of develops their own project and then retains ownership, so there's not an initial sale, it's just development costs. I do think in other cases, there's scenarios in which a developer will develop a project, do the tax credits, and then there is a transfer, to a housing authority, to a municipality, to somebody else. I also don't know, down the line if it sells, say somebody is involved for 20 years, an independent affordable housing company, and then sells to somebody else. I just want to make sure that we're not getting in the way of, I don't have any concerns about those models at all. I just want to make sure we're not preventing ourselves or precluding us from those scenarios.
I mean, I can get back to you with details, but the market for investors who buy tax credit funded projects operates in a very different way than investors who would buy sort of a simply outright rent restricted development, as this proposal sort of creates a model. It's a very different investor group, very different tax consequences, very different financial picture. So I can get back to you on that. But when projects are funded with tax credits, the investor basically invests in them for the tax credits, and there's a residual cash flow. And then tax credits can be syndicated again later on for different investment benefits. This model is very different. So I'm not sure how to quite answer your question.
Yeah, well, I think you kind of just did. I think that what you just said was exactly true, that there's a world in affordable housing where there's tax credits. I just want to make sure that in that world, and I think in some cases, there is a transfer of a turnkey project to another, management person, that we're not creating law here that would make those deals impossible.
Okay.
So, perhaps nominally the cost per unit would be more than what we allow, even though there's no concerns about that type of development because of all of the, protections that are already in place.
Okay.
So just to make sure that in the scenario you just outlined, that the actual transfer cost, the sale cost, would comply with the code that we're creating.
Okay. Okay, I understand the question. I'll look into that.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks. Anybody else have comments? All right, so we wrapped up our topics. Brittany, thank you very much. And we are on to liaison reports. Tom?
Yeah, give me 1 second to pull this out. Okay. Amagansett Citizens Advisory Committee, I did have a question in from them regarding the crosswalk by the Amagansett Green. We are aware it's been flashing for a week. It is in the process of getting fixed. The parts to repair that are in order, but I'll keep everybody updated on that. Thank you to my colleague David Lease, Steve O'Brien, and Steve Lynch in getting that addressed. Human Services.
Yeah, so can I just go on that?
Oh, please,
I
yeah,
apologize.
please, jump on in.
There was storm damage to it. The decision was decided to keep the flashing light on instead of turning it off. We'd rather have a light on instead of not being able to be operational. We thought that was better for public safety.
Thank you for that clarification. That's good. Human Services, just rather a sad kind of piece of when we're talking about housing in different areas. Evictions. We've obviously had a few in the last few months, and it's traumatic. It's traumatic for the evictee. It's traumatic for the organizations having to do that. And it's not the most humane situation possible where we see people's possessions left out on the main street. There is a process in place to have them collected, which we operate in conjunction with the Highway Department. But in the longer term, I've reached out to Sheriff Errol Toulon just to understand, is there any way to address, how that system operates to, perhaps ensure that the property is preserved in some way for a week or two to give the evictee an opportunity to kind of preserve some of their possessions. So I will address that more as we hear back from the sheriff. Arts Council, I just want to announce that we are having a community networking event on April 17th. We'll be in Town Hall from 6 p.m. We have presenters including Dalton Portella, Don Lenza and Bettina Lenza, Sherry Pascarella, and Heidi Wright. So looking forward to that. The last one was a great success. It was a fully packed house and hoping for the same again this time. Wildlife Management Advisory Committee will be meeting on the 26th at 2 p.m. We'll be following up from last Tuesday's discussion with regards to the deer population and ticks. And then lastly, some great news. Oh, sorry, one more thing about business. Committee is working with the Montauk Chamber of Commerce. Obviously, coming up on the 29th, we have the Montauk St. Patrick's Day Parade. Just working to get town cleaned up as much as possible. I put this out there to residents too. It's, you know, one of the early parts of the season when our town is on show. As much as you can, please get out there, pick up the litter, clean the windows. You know, let's make our town and our hamlets look special as we kick off this new season. And then lastly, some good news from the YMCA. The village has approved through their board's appeal for the pickle courts to move forward. I have reached out to the town engineer to get an update on where we are with that. It's going to go to the planning department next, and we will keep you updated. I don't think there's realistic opportunity of getting these to the residents in time for the summer, but we will move on this as quickly as we can. That's it for me.
Do you want to show the St. Patty's Day thing?
Oh, yeah, I'm so sorry. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. And Human Services, some really lovely news. So obviously today's St. Patrick's Day. I don't know if you can tell, but these are some pictures from the senior center of residents there taken by our public information officer, Patrick Lorenz. You know, the effort that our team there put in to make events like this special for our residents is incredible. So thank you to all the team there doing that. And great to see everybody enjoying themselves so much and the incredible foods being put on. Thank you.
The Water Quality thank you, Tom. The Water Quality Technical Advisory Committee is starting the review of their RFA 1 for calendar year 2026. We'll be moving forward to that. I wouldn't be surprised, Madam Supervisor, we'll have to have meetings here in April, and I'll get those dates to you
great.
so we can put on there. Part of that is we'll actually have a resolution on for Thursday that discusses the Peconic Estuary Program's contribution to from our water quality funding, which is in the general obligation law of the CPF water quality. That will be on for this Thursday. Going to aquaculture, the Scout program, the 2026 application cycle. The written comment period is due by May 10th, 2026. Please contact Thomas Ralicki at 631-853-4865 if you have any other questions about the comment cycle and about that program. Also going on to aquaculture, the season's off to a good start despite some weather-related delays. For the first time in our department head, John Dunn's tenure, they had to use a chainsaw to go through the ice in order to get to the water pump into the new hatchery. It goes back to what we were discussing a couple of weeks ago, that there was an extreme gear loss. A lot of the oyster growers up further west. There's a nice batch of oysters growing in the hatchery, and they did the third of the fourth oyster spawn last week also. The clam spawns will continue next week. Oyster gardens will be refloated in the coming weeks, weather permitting. And the aquaponic and the Nat Peak aquaponic gardens did get disturbed by the ice, but they should be able to get them back to normal, which is good news. Oyster survival should be just fine. They are tough creatures. Thank you, John. Okay, also moving ahead on there then too, the town's CPF advisory committee met yesterday. I want to thank Billy Babinski for joining that committee also. It was a great discussion there also, so thank you, Billy. I want to let everyone know that Daniel Farnham Jr. has been appointed to the Suffolk County Working Waterfront Committee as a representative for the town of East Hampton. Dan Farnham Jr. is a second-generation commercial fisherman in Montauk, graduated East Hampton High School and Hamilton College, and has worked with his business his entire adult life. He's primarily an offshore fisherman, longline for golden tilefish and trawling for silver hawk. He's also an active member on the federal and local level when it comes to fisheries management, serving as a member of the East Hampton Town's Fishery Advisory Committee and the Dock and Slips Committee. And for the Mid-Atlantic Fisheries Council, Dan is on the advisory panel for golden tilefish, mackerel, squid, and butterfish. And on the New England Fishery Management Council, he serves on the small mesh multi-species advisory panel. Again, this committee for the Suffolk County Working Waterfront Committee, this committee that was is joined, that's also part of the obligation law for funding for protecting our shoreside infrastructure that was led by legislator Ann Welker, I think, and I also thank Dan for your participation and advocating for East Hampton Town. Let everyone know that there is a spring burn window at Mashomack Park that is now effective through April 30th. The prescribed fire and weather conditions are dependent. Any questions on that, please contact the Mashomack Stewardship Team at 631-749-1001. That leads me to what New York State is doing currently in our state parks, on Neff Beach State Park. They are currently not burning, but they are grinding significant loads of infected pine material and trying to remove that part of the collaboration that the supervisor has worked with the governor's office for funding for that project. So that is actively moving forward on there then too. I want to let everyone know that there is that there might be some discussions or inaccuracy in some of the actions that have been going forward with some of the dead geese. A couple of Fridays ago, there was email that was directed to the clerk of the trustees trying to confirm jurisdiction over the locations where some of the dead bird kill was mostly confined to. That was confirmed by the clerk of the trustees. The town never said that it would not help. We wanted just to determine the jurisdiction of need and that we would be help if needed or requested. That request has not come in, but the town still has convened and discussed this internally, and also met with Ryan McGarry, the New York State DEC Assistant Regional Director, also then too. So we never declined anything. All we asked for is jurisdiction confirmation. Lastly, I have Friends of Erin, the 64th Grand Marshal of the Montauk St. Patrick's Day Parade, which is kicking off at 12 o'clock on March 29th, is Thomas Grenshi. In 1982, when Mr. Grenshi was 19, he joined the East Hampton Town Police Department as a traffic control officer, and over the next 5 or 6 years worked as a dispatcher in the motor pool and in the summer months on the town's police boat. He became a full-time officer in 1988 and graduated that year from Suffolk County Police Academy. 10 years later, he was promoted to detective, then to uniformed sergeant. He became the East Hampton Police Commander in 2005, and in 2010 was promoted to lieutenant, assigned to the police headquarters in Wainscott. Following his dad's footsteps, who was a state park ranger, Tom Grenshi Jr. served the East Hampton Town Police Department from 1982 until retiring as a lieutenant in 2015. From 1985 until June of 1988, when he was appointed to the East Hampton Town Permanent Police Officer, he worked as a part-time New York State Police Officer, East Hampton Town Dispatcher, and again, as a police mechanic. Mr. Tom, I don't call him Tommy, I call him Tom, routinely sought to better himself as an officer by attending numerous seminars, FBI Academy for 11 weeks, also that happened at the Marine Corps Base in Quantico. Tom joined the Montauk Fire Department in 1981 and continues to be an active member. 1983, became lieutenant at Company Number 2. 84 to 86, serves as captain of the Company Number 2. Assistant chief in 93, second assistant chief in 93, and then as chief from 96 to 97. That wasn't busy enough. He's a member of the Montauk Lions Club, son of the American Legion Post, and the Montauk Friends of Erin, becoming an honorary member of the Friends of Erin in 2014. And now we wish Tom and his family a wonderful experience during the town board. Wish Tom and his family a wonderful experience during the St. Patrick's Day festivities. Anyone's interested, the Friends of Erin will be having their luncheon on March 27th, and on the 28th, their annual cocktail party, which is a blast. And then again, the parade is March 29th for the 64th annual Montauk St. Patrick's Day Parade. I pretty much want to thank Tom for everything. It's great to know him. He served the town really well. I think it's a wonderful honor that the Friends of Erin has bestowed on him and his family as the 64th annual Grand Marshal of the Montauk St. Patrick's Day Parade.
Here,
That's all I have.
Thank
you, David.
Yes, I have a short liaison report today. The Sustainability Committee met, and they are going to focus on sustainable landscaping practices, best practices, as we head into spring, particularly focusing on irrigation and education, focusing on water use in town. As we know, we've seen numerous drought seasons. Suffolk County Water Authority has declared droughts in our town, and we'd like to educate people on best practices for any type of irrigation, or even if it's necessary. We also are going to be educating the public on the use of pesticides and fertilizers and how they make their way into our drinking water and our surface waters and impact our own health. So I look forward to working with several nonprofits in the town as well as the Sustainability Committee on this education campaign. And also on March 28th, the groups and folks are exercising their First Amendment rights to have and there will be a No Kings rally here on Town Hall. The organizers have been in direct communication with our police department, and again, I want to thank the police department for all the help that they give to our community in keeping us safe and helping people hold safe events. And please sign up for it, this event if you plan to attend. It's Saturday, March 28th. It kicks off at 11 a.m. It's for 2 hours. For this particular event, there is an opportunity to park off-site and have a bus take you to Town Hall. And if you do plan on attending, I'm going to ask you now to please respect our adjacent property owners, business owners in the town, and follow the parking directions and please stay on Town Hall property, and look forward to good weather on the day.
Thank you, Kate. Ian?
Yeah, I've got a very brief report. First of all, happy St. Patrick's Day, everybody. Tom wins the Spirit Award, I think,
Yes, he does.
by a good margin. If you look at his shoes and socks, I think everything's green.
Good leprechaun.
Well done, Tom.
Good leprechaun.
Yeah.
Good leprechaun
Good
award for you,
timing.
Tom.
There's a spring CAC meeting tonight at 6:30 Ashwag Hall. At the main topic of conversation is going to be the Springs Library parking lot. I continue to hear feedback on that, which has still been positive, but anybody who's interested in that design or that project, tonight at 6:30 Ashwag Hall. There's some other items on the agenda as well, but I think that's the main one. And lastly, I just want to say today was a really important meeting for me. You know, it's one of the reasons I like this job is because I want to make a difference, and I just want to thank everybody who helped with all of the many topics of affordable housing. Thank you, Kathy. Thanks to the board for putting it on, and thanks to the ADU committee, the Community Housing Advisory Board, and to everybody in the public who has had comments throughout. I think it was really special for me to see that all come together. We still have work to do to get things passed and get things done, but I think today represents some very meaningful steps across a wide range of pieces of legislation that can help with that problem. I also just want to recognize again Tina, Mark, Eric, Ed, Brittany, and the town staff for the countless hours they've put. It's very hard to craft legislation that gets to this stage, and so just want to say thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Ian. I just have two things I want to bring up. I have two resolutions on for Thursday night. I just wanted to go through them with my colleagues. The first is to authorize a human services grant to the Choral Society of the Hamptons. They approached us a month or two ago saying that they were going to be celebrating their 80th anniversary, and they also want to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. They're having 3 performances, and they're expecting between the 3 performances an audience of over 1,300 South Fork residents. The total program cost is $131,000, so they have requested a one-time grant in the amount of $5,500. I've talked to you all separately, and the board was supportive, so that resolution is going to be on for Thursday. And then the second thing I wanted to bring up is that we had a town board work session back on February 3rd where we talked about ensuring that the East Hampton Town Airport was safe, but also self-sustaining, that we were looking to increase the airport landing fees and fuel flowage fees because we anticipate issuing additional bonds to cover improvement projects. Believe I will have the engineering on for that at the April 2nd meeting to do bond resolutions to fund the engineering for 2 projects there. But, you know, we want to ensure that, again, the airport's self-sustaining and it's not a burden to the taxpayers. So we're looking to increase landing fees by 15% and fuel flowage fee by 2 cents, going from 30 cents per gallon to 32 cents per gallon. And this would go into effect May 1st, 2026. Since we wanted to allow plenty of time for airport users or community members to reach out if they had any questions, concerns about these fee increases, and I haven't heard from a single person. I don't know if anybody else has heard from anyone outreaching. So the schedule was always, we'd bring it back to our work session on the 17th of March and adopt the increases at the March 19th meeting, again, not going into effect till May 1st before the start of the season. So those 2 resolutions will be on for Thursday. And so now we have a couple of resolutions that we need to do today.
I'd like to make a motion to table resolution. Sorry, it's my privilege, but I would also like to make a motion to table resolution 2026-468.
Second.
All in favor?
For the 19th, correct.
Aye.
Aye.
Yeah, I'm sorry, let's do this again.
Sure, I just made a motion to table resolution 2026-468 till the 19th of March.
Second.
A discussion. So the reason we're tabling this is because we're doing the bond resolution and the resolution to authorize the acquisition on the same night.
That's correct.
We don't usually split that. Okay, second. You had a second. All in favor?
Aye. I'd like to make a motion, hello. 2026-469. This is a secret determination for bond resolutions for office renovations.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
470 is approve agreement for Papinski Farmscape for meadow management of 66 Main Street. This is for annually mowing for the meadow management of that area for amount of $1,850 per year to Papinski Farmscape.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. 471 is a bond resolution for $50,000 for office renovations at 300 Panago Place. The PPU is 15 years.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Flight.
Aye.
Deputy Supervisor Lease.
Aye.
Councilmember Rogers.
Aye.
Councilmember Calder Piedmont.
Aye.
Supervisor Burke Gonzalez.
Aye.
I have Resolution 472, which is the acceptance of a local match contribution to the sustainable planning in coastal communities, restoration, revitalization, and risk reduction. Whereas the town of East Hampton is implementing sustainable planning initiatives under sustainable planning in coastal communities, risk reduction, revitalization, and restoration. Whereas a local match component of the project will be undertaken by the Nature Conservancy, who has completed a community partnership and consensus building project around climate adaptation with business owners within the study area, and the cost of this project is being applied toward the local match requirement for said contract. Whereas TNC will also donate professional services. Whereas the town has received a letter from TNC confirming its contribution towards this project dated March 10th for the total amount of $44,000, including $30,000 in contractual and $14,000 in donated professional services. Resolved that the town board of the town of East Hampton accepts the March 10th letter from the Nature Conservancy.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Resolution 473, this is to amend Resolution 2026-60, and this is just to correct the account code.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I have Resolution 2026-474. That's to amend Resolution 2026-390 to reflect the correct years for the goals invoices.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
475 is a budget modification for the police department. We're decreasing full-time salaries in the amount of $57,727 and increasing subcontractor costs in the same amount.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
476 is to approve change order number 1 for the East Hampton Town Police Department dispatch room renovations. That was bid EH 25036. The total cost for the project is now $881,808.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I have 2026-477. This is a budget modification for the 2025 Sanitation Department. Be it resolved that the town increases the revenue budget line for insurance recoveries in the amount of $96,091 and increases the budget line for full-time salaries in the same amount.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. I have Resolution 2026-478 is to accept an employee's resignation.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
479 is to authorize remediation methods and/or commencement of a Supreme Court action within the town right-of-way at Lowenstein Court.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
480 is the 2025 fiscal year-end budget modification for a total of $2,673,317.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Do I have a motion to go into exec session?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to go into executive session for CPF, personnel, and advice of counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.